my impending talk, but there we go.
Yeah, you're an absolute professional, so
whatever.
you'll just fly through. Am I after you or before you?
I don't think you're before me because I'm on in about 5 minutes. So
you're third, Darren, on the agenda.
Oh, right, okay. As long as I'm not following somebody who's really good.
I think you are. I think you are following somebody who's really good.
Oh, bugger. Oh, well. Just manage expectations.
Okay, so I've just set the live stream up, so we're all good to run. Okay, I think everybody's back in the meeting room. So yeah, I think everybody's back. Good stuff. Hopefully you had some good conversations in those breakout rooms. Met somebody that you've not met before, or built on a relationship that you existingly know already. I am going to be recording from this point so that we have something to share on. Just do that. So that we've got something to share afterwards, because part of this event is about an awareness event as much as anything else. So if you just bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, so welcome to International Men's Day, Oxfordshire. Thank you for joining us. For those of you that are here on the Zoom call, and for everybody else that's joining us via our live stream on YouTube Live, then a warm welcome to the event. It is an event that we were going to run live. So firstly, live but in person. So firstly, shout out to our would-be partners for the event, which is the Hilton Garden Inn at Abingdon, which actually I am at today to run the event from here with hopefully a reliable internet. Thanks to Andy Keeley and the team at the Hilton Garden Inn for their support in terms of running the event or organising the event to this point. Of course, we're disappointed that due to the current lockdown, doesn't allow us to get together as an event in person, despite the precautions that they have made in the venue to create such a safe environment. Now, you may know already that International Men's Day is a celebration event for men and boys. It's a global day celebrated every year in more than 60 countries around the globe. And it invites every man, woman, girl and boy in the world to come together and celebrate men and boys in all their diversity. Now, specifically in the UK, there's 3 core themes for International Men's Day. They are making a positive difference to the well-being of lives of men and boys, raising awareness or funds for charities supporting men and boys' well-being, and promoting a positive conversation about men, manhood and masculinity. Now, hence why we're doing an event which is, yes, a celebration, but yes, an event in terms of raising money for Oxfordshire Mind, and the event today is raised in excess of £660, and thank you for your support. But also it is about talking about some of those more serious topics that impact on men today in terms of physical health and mental health. And hopefully you've seen from the agenda, we've mixed up the agenda to hopefully be an informative and an interesting event for you. Now, a really interesting tweet was shared by International Men's Day organisers this morning with some intriguing statistics. And that was that 76% of suicides are men, 85% of the homeless are men, 70% of homicide victims are men, and then 40% of domestic abuse victims are men, which is unthoughtful, and men are the majority victims of violent crime. Now, that's not a purpose in terms of why we're running the event, but it is one of the reasons. And when I was asked to organise the event, I personally didn't hesitate, because I have attended International Women's Day in Oxfordshire, where I was invited for the last 3 years, and I felt it would be a great idea to organise this event today to celebrate men and boys. Additionally, I've had some amazing support in the last 18 months for my own personal and men's health issues, which I'll share as we go through the event a little bit today. And this is part of my giving back, I guess. I like to give back as much as I can to charities and good causes. And this is also helping to raise some awareness of some hot topics of the fears for men and boys today. We have an excellent range of speakers today who will help us to celebrate, but also raise that awareness of some key health issues for men and boys. And as I mentioned, the event is in aid of Oxfordshire Mind, and all your ticket monies will be in a form of donation to them for all their deserving work in the community. I will share in the chat this link. So hopefully you can see a link in the chat. That is a link to an auction that's being organised by Oxfordshire Mind today in support of the event. So if you'd like to make a further donation, or if you'd like to bid for one of those prizes, please do. The auction is open until tomorrow. Of course, thank you to everybody who's donated so far and attended this event to support the event. Your support is really, truly appreciated. If you're watching on the stream or you're watching the recording of the event afterwards, then if you now wish to make a donation yourself, then please do contact Oxfordshire Mind Direct for more details about how you could do that. Thank you to all the speakers a little bit in advance for giving up their time in support of today's first International Men's Day event in Oxfordshire, and what was actually the first in the diary across the UK this year. So just some simple housekeeping, if I may. First of all, everyone except the speaker that will be speaking at the time will be on mute. That's just really so that we can sort of concentrate without any background noise. The chat will be open so that you can ask questions or you can communicate with other members in the audience. If you put a question into the chat, it may be answered during the speaker's talk, or if not, they will jump on the chat afterwards and later answer the chat itself in that way. Obviously, you're invited when you're invited to speak or ask a question, then I'll leave it with you to unmute yourself, because what I find is if I'm trying to unmute you, you're trying to unmute yourself, we just play around a bit with the buttons. So I'll leave it with you to unmute yourself if you are going to speak at that point. If you find that the streaming is suffering, if I can ask you then just to turn off your video. Ideally, it would be nice to have you in the room with us from that point, but obviously if it's suffering from that side, please turn your video off and that would help. And also when I say about chat, please use that chat respectively. You're obviously not to distract the speaker when they're speaking, don't want sort of a chat popping up in front of them, and obviously listening to the talks. Now, obviously I appreciate this is a 3-hour session. It would have been much easier online. Offline in terms of if we're doing it here at the hotel. So feel free, obviously, to have comfort breaks, go and make yourself a drink at that point. We won't have any specific breaks because we are on the live stream. I think on the live stream it feel a bit weird. So if there's any reason where we make up some time, then I'll use that for an appropriate break at that time. So first of all, let's get started. And our first speaker for today's event, and as I say, I've got hopefully an interesting blend of speakers for you, sharing their expertise, their knowledge and their experience. And the first speaker is Steve Cook. And Steve's going to talk about Everyman and the extraordinary nature of being an ordinary bloke. Now, Steve is not just a bloke in a hat, he's an everyman. And aside from being an adequate husband, a proud father of 5, a concerned son and a hopeless DIYer, a rubbish saxophonist and a lifelong football fan that you heard about just a moment ago, someone who doesn't really get beer and who cries when he hears a great lyric, Steve is a strategist, conceptual thinker, commentator on the human condition and systems change catalyst. And I personally always enjoy every conversation that I have with Steve. He advises leadership in business, civil society and government in the UK, EU and internationally, and focusing on the purposeful interactions between people and organisations and how they can change to better benefit society. And when I was having the conversation with Steve, and I was talking about his work as a brand strategist, I thought it'd be really good to start the event talking about brand bloke or brand man. So Steve, I'm going to now hand over to yourself.
You're on mute, sweetheart.
Thank you, Mike. I hope everybody can hear me now. Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. That's quite an introduction, and you've taken up half of my speech now. So that was all I was going to say for the afternoon. But good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Mike, for both organising what promises to be a wonderful event and celebrating an important day. And thank you for inviting me along to share some humble thoughts with you all. As Mike said, I am Steve Cook. That is without debate. I'm also a husband and father and strategist and a proud bloke. And I'm not entirely sure what that means, and I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to go with this. But let's see how it works out. As I reflected on today and on the reason why we're all having this event, I became unbelievably concerned about my role in it. I thought, well, I'm not particularly valid in any way, shape or form. I am, after all, just an ordinary man. There is nothing about me in any way, shape or form that is extraordinary or exciting or different or perplexing or challenging or worth celebrating or even talking about. And on that basis, I have nothing to talk about. But then I realized that perhaps that was the point. Perhaps being an ordinary bloke is in fact really important. And perhaps all those other really ordinary blokes out there have important and exciting stories to tell and ideas to share and fears to face and qualities to bring to the world. Perhaps these should be explored and discussed, I thought, through my own lens and life experiences. And perhaps by exploring these, we can all think about ordinary men in ways that make them us feel extraordinary, and that after all is the celebration for today. So I'm going to share a few moments from my own life. I'm putting myself on the line a little bit here, but I'm going to share some moments from my own life experience thus far and on my own aspirations for the future that might shed some light on this this particular me, ordinary bloke. So forgive me for getting personal, but maybe this is what it's all about. Maybe that's the whole point. So I'm just going to tell you a bit about me. I was born in the 1960s. I grew to traditional adulthood and then rebellion in the 1970s. I saw the real highs of life in the 1980s, and I mean that in every sense. I saw the lows of life in the 90s, and I got naughty and possibly even angry actually in the noughties. And I became disillusioned in the early 2010s and then found peace in the second half of the last decade. The 20s for me, like everyone else here, is an entirely different ballgame. Who knows where we're going with that? But I am absolutely a product of the eras that I have lived through. And I'm just going to walk through those a little bit. I grew up in a world where men were men. I learned to not talk about myself or show weakness. I learned that school and exams, learning the rules were important. I learned that men went to work and frankly, that women didn't. And that having a job was my future role and quietly providing for a future family was my purpose. I learned that girls wore pink and that I had to look after my mum and my kid sister, and that dads were distant beings who shouted a lot when you told them how you felt, or in my case, who shouted a lot when you told them anything at all and constantly called you boy, and I still hate that word. I learned that when a mate got hurt or had a crisis, your response was to laugh, make a joke about his pain, tell all your other mates the joke, and only then, as a last resort, actually help your mate. But only when your mate asked for help, which he never did, because, like me, he was busy not showing weakness. I learned that stoic bravado was the way to behave. So far, so traditional. And then miraculously, for me at least, at the age of 13, something incredible happens, and that something was punk. If you happen to love music, and if you're already challenging all things your parents ever taught you, and you're already beginning to drift away from the rules at school, and you're already questioning the normals of life, and you happen to be in central London where the action is, punk was absolute manna from heaven, as it was for me. Punk gave me permission to get angry and to self-express in a way that I'd never been allowed to do at home or at school as a child. As a boy, punk taught me that men could wear pink too, and in fact black eyeliner, and I spent most of the late 1970s wearing black eyeliner. It was an amazing time, but it was also angry and full of tribalism, full of testosterone arguably, full of those who thought it was okay to be benignly or actively racist, and those like me that militantly thought it wasn't okay to be that in any way, shape or form. But that was the prevailing mood at the time. There was serious trouble on the streets and serious trouble in my mind. During that period, the walls came crashing down. Everything was blown to pieces in every sense. And when I wasn't running away from my parents or teachers, I was running away from skinheads and National Front Nazis. But mostly I was running away from traditional roles. And to a degree, I was running away from me, trying to find someone else that wasn't living in my head. By the start of the 1980s, I frankly only had one choice. There was only one vocation, only one place for a boy like me to go, and that was art school. This was where the rebels went, and by that point I was very much a rebel. And it's where they went to turn their angry thoughts into beautiful ideas. And this is where I learned that being a man wasn't quite as simple as I'd been led to believe. This is where my entire future was created, as it turned out. And I studied conceptual thinking, and my mentor for 5 years at art school was Stanley Kubrick, the film director. And you really learn a lot about life when you spend 5 years with Stanley Kubrick. At art school, I also learned that girls were at least, if not more so, equals in every sense, and certainly didn't need looking after in the way that I've been led to believe. When it comes to ideas creation, wow, I learned that everybody was equal, everybody had voice, everybody had enormous strength and enormous ability. By 1983, I learned to skip merrily into the world of advertising. I became a creative director in big name advertising agencies in London. And in those ad agencies, I met all sorts of men that I'd never met before. And it was a revelation. We were given permission to be as brave and as extrovert and as challenging and ideas focused as possible. In fact, our careers depended on this. If you weren't all of these things, you tended to get sacks. It was a pretty ferocious business and industry to be in. In the 1980s, where those of us who are old enough to remember, all sorts of barriers were being broken down everywhere. I spent most of the 80s wearing flowers in my back pocket because I was a Smiths fan, and life was a blast. I could be me. I could actually open up and share fears and show weaknesses and share ideas without worrying that I'd be laughed at. I grew into a man during the 1980s, but without all the baggage that seemed at the time to come with that title out in the sort of mainstream world. All the traditional bets were off, as far as I was concerned, and that was fantastic. That was a real blessing. But the strange thing was that although in our little world in advertising, everything was new and was changing every day, when we ventured into the client's world, it was pretty much as my dad's world had been. Nothing was very different. Men were men, testosterone-fueled men. The corporate culture they inhabited seemed to make the men, and frankly the women, behave in ways that I couldn't understand. Now, although this is starting to change, I think in no small measure the corporate world still does that to people, and that's a really sad thing. But by 1987, I'd miraculously got married, and I was married to someone who was actually crazier than me. Life was spent going to yet more gigs and poetry slams and being a pseudo-intellectual and being the life and soul at crazy parties and really not caring very much about anything. So I wasn't really a man. I was still a sort of man boy. And in fact, I'm not entirely sure I'm a man now. I think I'm still very much a boy. And certainly not, my thoughts certainly weren't on the traditional role of a man at that point. But by 1988, in the middle of this sort of crazy man-boy world that I was living in, also brought a change that had and still has, 32 years later, the most profound effects on me. 1988 was the year that I became a dad. And everything changed. And anybody that's a dad maybe knows this and can recognize this. But as I held my brand new daughter in my arms in the hospital, everything changed immediately. It was like a lightning bolt, immediately. And this was weird because I'd spent 9 months telling myself that nothing much would be any different after my child was born. You know, what a naive fool I was. It was immediate. I immediately resolved that I would be that dad, the fun, loving, freedom-giving, supportive and providing dad that I had never had myself. In fact, I often stated that I was going to be, my dad taught me one thing, and that was how to be a dad, because I do everything the opposite to the way that he did it. I vowed that my wife and my daughter would be my world and that I would be theirs. I vowed that I would never shout or be angry with my daughter. And I never have. I've never shouted at any of my children at all. I vowed that we would be the happiest of happy families and that I would be a caring, sharing man, as I thought a man should be and as a father should be. By 1989, I had another beautiful daughter and I had my own business by that point, a good home and a wonderful life. Fantastic. I was learning how to be the man I had vowed to be in the way that I thought men should behave in a world that I was rapidly getting to understand and growing up in. But all of that came to an abrupt end in 1993. Boo-hoo for me. When I first discovered that my business had been royally shafted, big style, and then that I had lost my wife to another man. So that was a different perspective on what men were and could be. Turned out that being a loving, caring, traditional man wasn't good enough. Who knew? My world came crashing down around me in the most profound ways possible, and I told absolutely no one at all. The day after my marriage ended, I went to a client meeting. I didn't tell my colleagues, I didn't tell my friends, I didn't tell anyone. I carried on as normal. I discovered that being a man with kids but without a wife is a very difficult place to be. I had to leave my home, my children, my dogs, my world, one way or another. I got a flat and desperately tried to make it a home for my children to visit. This initially wasn't easy. I had a lilo and a small yucca plant because I thought that would make it more homely, and a plate. But hey, life was fun, you know, when they visited, and it was really good. We made the most of it. We were the three musketeers, and I was the happy, busy, supportive man that they knew as their dad. But when they weren't around, I just existed. I paid child maintenance and I kissed empty children's pillows good nights. I remember once being in a park and having a picnic with my daughters on a sunny day. It was wonderful. It was absolutely brilliant. One of my daughters sneezed, and that odd, you know, that nuclear green snot that only children seem to be able to produce came out. And every mother, and the park was filled with mothers with children, every mother reached for tissues to give to me because they didn't think I'd have any of my own. So I declined their offers and then got my own tissues from the bag, to the looks of amazement from the mothers all around me. They looked surprised that a man could have such parental foresight as actually packing tissues. And I realised that no matter how much I believed that I was a superhero dad and been an exemplary husband, this was not the way that many in society saw me. As a single dad, I must be incapable. And to have lost my wife, I must have been really bad. I must have been that stereotypical man. And from that point, this ordinary bloke retreated from life. I went through the motions. I only focused on my children and I didn't really care about much else. I became fascinated by the human condition, which frankly made me better in my job, as it perversely turned out. I really started to think about all those ordinary blokes who had been misunderstood and mistreated. I joined Fathers for Justice, but I kept my thoughts to myself. I didn't rock any boats, and I led a quiet but entirely fake life. I completely forgot how to be me. And I still didn't talk about any of it in any meaningful way with anyone. As far as my friends, family and colleagues were concerned, I was fine because I kept giving them I'm fine vibes. Everyone just assumed that I'd been through some troubles but was clearly all right. My stoicism stopped me reaching out, and because I was a man, no one ever asked me how I was. The 90s for me, therefore, were dreadful. I never got any help because I never sought any help. I was able to lead a strangely parallel existence where I could address other men's issues like erectile dysfunction when I launched Viagra across Europe, and HIV and AIDS when I worked to brand and market new virology treatments. I spent a lot of time in Terence Higgins Trust learning what it was like to be gay and to live with HIV. Or with friends when they sadly got divorced, because by that point I was the sage one. I was the master of all things to do with divorce and being a single parent. I got the t-shirt. I could be the outrageous creative or the life and soul at parties, but all of this was an act. It was a fake Steve. But the good news, ladies and gentlemen, is that this is the end of the gloomy part of my tales from an ordinary man. The new millennium brought a new Steve into the world, and the world had started to change profoundly. I'd been asleep for a few years, but when I woke up, I was into some really bright lights. The 2000s were challenging and confusing for most people on some level, including me, but they also brought me a new partner, 3 more beautiful children, opportunities to do my bit to change things further, and a growing career. By the time my relationship ended in 2008, I was a mature, bulletproof, self-reliant, emotionally strong, and over the naive, idealistic ways of thinking about myself and my family. I think that I grew up and I became a realist, something I hoped I would never be, but I became a realist at that point. And I saw my role as a man and the roles of men around me changing. I saw attitudes to men beginning to change, and I started to see the beginnings of a real breaking down of the traditional views of men that I had been given in my early life. I began to see these views breaking down in business and actually more recently in wider society, which is fantastic. But I also felt that this wasn't happening fast enough, that change could be accelerated further, that we all had a responsibility to think and conduct ourselves differently. I actually became a little angry with myself for not doing more, and I wondered if we as society could ever meaningfully break through the crust of the traditions that I'd grown up with. And I was angry that I still found it difficult to really share my own feelings with others, and that despite every effort, I was finding it hard to shake past events off. I carried these thoughts into the 2010s when everything in my world became more urgent, more determined to achieve something of worth, more inquiring about those age-old questions that men and people generally ask as they get older. You know, what is life all about? What's my role in it? So it may have been a sort of middle-age crisis, I don't know. But 2014 saw the most magnificent moment of my life when I met my now wife. And we walked and still walk arm in arm through life as mature-ish, well, she is, I'm not, adults, and with complete determination to see life through together. All is good and calm, tranquil even in my world now, and I'm completely focused on doing my bit to help society change as a result, because I have my own peace, so I can focus outwards a little bit more than perhaps I've done in the past. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my story. That there is nothing extraordinary in it at all. Everyone's got their own stories, and possibly some men here in the audience have gone through similar paths to mine. Everyone's had their own triumphs and their own failures and bad habits and extraordinary strengths. And today I see dads being seen and seeing themselves in completely different ways to how my dad saw himself as a dad and how I saw myself as a young dad back in the early 90s, late 80s. I see men sharing feelings much more, albeit only when they feel safe. And I think we have to overcome that. You know, what does it take to feel safe? And I see men feeling much more comfortable talking about their physical and mental well-being. But I think we've got a long way to go with this. Most importantly, I see men reappraising their roles in family and work and society much more than ever before. I have a son-in-law, and my son-in-law has kindly was just about to give myself and my wife a grandchild next May. And so I see the way my son-in-law is, and I hope the way he's going to be as a father will be radically different to the way that I understood it when I was young. So it's been a long journey for me, and shaking off tradition has been no easy task. But I think myself and I think society generally are going to get there in the end, and I'm certain of it. So I have no moral to share with you. I don't have a cathartic takeaway from my story. I can't hit you with anything really powerful and meaningful, except to say that despite all the trials and tribulations and all the pain and the joy and all the good and the bad press we men get, all the wild and wide views of us, I really think that it's time to celebrate being men. I think we can actually start to do that fully and properly, and to live our lives in ways that are worthy of celebration. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, a virtual round of applause there. Much appreciated. Thank you for sharing your story. I knew from the conversation we had in preparation for today, it was going to be engaging. So many things that you shared with us to consider and celebrate today. Such a thought-provoking way, actually, to position our event today. And I'm sure many of us will relate to your story in some way, and perhaps in 100% of the way, the things that you shared. I know from our conversations that you're an exceptional strategist, and appreciate the thoughts you shared around strategy of men today. And it's really interesting to hear that you've already contributed to men's health with helping with brand Viagra. So much appreciate the contribution that you've made and to the event, and obviously for the moments we've had in conversations. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for your time, and thanks for your contribution. If you do have any questions, then please do drop them in the chat, and I'm sure Steve will respond to those questions. I'm now going to move on to our second speaker, and our second speaker is Dr. Sally Cubbin. And Sally is going to talk about ADHD in men, common, impairing, but easily treated. Now, in her 27-year career, Dr. Sally Cubbin has become one of the UK's leading specialists in the diagnosis, treatment and medical management of adult ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. She's an executive member of the UK AAN, which is the UK Adult ADHD Network, and runs her ADHD consultancy practice, usually based at the Manor Hospital in Oxford, but currently operating virtually. Dr. Cubbin is a key contributor to various UK expert consensus statement boards, raising awareness of her complex and misunderstood disorder, this was complex and misunderstood disorder, and informing best practice in diverse issues areas, including ADHD in the workplace, women with ADHD, and NHS ADHD service provision. She leads workshops for healthcare professionals on the pharmacological treatment of ADHD and the latest research into the condition. Dr. Cubbin is widely published and has contributed ADHD-specific chapters in a number of medical textbooks and guidance notes. And I'm delighted to welcome Sally, and thank you, Sally, for your time with us today. And Sally, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mike. That's great. Let me just share my screen so that I can get my slides up. Right, hang on. Oh, host disabled attendee screen sharing. So I can't do that yet.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, try it again.
Okay, here we go. Right. Right, there we are. Lovely. Right, so I'm going to talk about ADHD in men, although obviously ADHD does occur in women as well, but it is more common in men, and it is a very common disorder, and it's a very easily treated but misunderstood disorder. And what we're going to cover today is a bit about what ADHD is and how it affects men, and how treatment can improve lives, because it does impact men across every part of their interactions with society, not just socially, but also in the workplace and in relationships. It affects their lives in many different ways. And as I said, ADHD is a really common disorder, and it does present in childhood, but it often doesn't present to professionals until adulthood, because although symptoms start in childhood, so the symptom does present in that it starts, it often isn't particularly impairing for many. Some children certainly get diagnosed, but there are lots and lots of adults that I diagnosed with ADHD who were never diagnosed as a child. And actually, when you look at the symptoms they had, some of them, even if they had been assessed, they wouldn't have been diagnosed, because often it does actually get worse as an adult. And often ADHD is confused for other disorders. So many men are actually diagnosed already with depression or anxiety or personality disorder. And actually, even though they might have seen psychiatrist or their GP and got some sort of label and attempt at help, they may have got the wrong diagnosis. And this is very common. ADHD affects about 2.5% of adults, probably slightly more. And it affects people in all IQs and in all types of jobs. Even people in very high functioning, powerful jobs can have ADHD. And equally, people with low IQs with learning disability also have it. It affects people across the whole spectrum of job types and of IQs. And it results in serious, significant impairment. So even though someone might seem to be successful, they could still have ADHD, because their success may be coming at quite a personal cost in terms of the effort that they're needing to put in and the stress their role is causing them. And yet ADHD is very treatable. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and there's 3 different types. So one is the combined type, where people have both the inattentive symptoms, so AD, attention deficit, that's the inattentive symptoms that I'll talk about in a minute. There's the inattentive, and combined type means they also have hyperactive symptoms. So the HD is hyperactivity disorder. So combined type, people that have both types of symptoms. But many people, and they call themselves ADD, they call the disorder ADD usually, that's attention deficit disorder without the H. So they only have the inattentive symptoms. So you don't have to be hyperactive to have a diagnosis of ADHD. And then there are some people that have just the hyperactive impulsive presentation, but actually they're fairly uncommon, because if you have hyperactive symptoms, usually you've got inattentive symptoms too. Now, it is more common in boys than girls, so certainly in the children's clinics, you will have lots more boys diagnosed, but it seems to be a much more equal ratio in adults. It's more likely that women start to get diagnosed, but there is still a majority men, but less of a majority. And it's extremely underdiagnosed and under-recognised. So probably only about 1 in 20 adults who have ADHD actually are diagnosed in the UK. Now, boys and men tend to be more diagnosed than women because they have more defiant behaviour. They have more oppositional behaviour. They're more likely to be noticeable. Whereas girls and women often have behaviour that's more pro-social. So we talk about girls and women being people pleasers. They're more likely to compensate for their symptoms. For example, at university or in sixth form, adult women might be very likely to get their work in at the last minute under pressure because they hate being in trouble. They'd hate a detention. They hate the teacher disapproving. So they do their work at the last minute. And the teacher doesn't particularly notice the fact that they're impaired and it causes an awful lot of stress. And they probably could have done a much better job if they'd been able to start sooner, if they hadn't had ADHD. Now, what actually happens across childhood is that some symptoms do reduce. And there used to be a myth that you grow out of ADHD and you don't have it at 18. So when you become an adult, it doesn't exist anymore. Now, that's probably because the hyperactive symptoms do reduce. So if you look at the lines on the left of the graph, these are the hyperactive impulsive symptoms and the blue lines for men. And as you can see, it does reduce quite dramatically as children grow. So those graphs have got 3 phases: children age 8 to 9, and then 13 to 14, and then teenagers 16 to 17. And that's probably why it used to be thought that people grow out of ADHD. But if you look at the right-hand lines, that's the inattentive symptoms. And as children go through their childhood, maybe slightly, and there's a slight reduction initially, but then if anything, it starts to increase. And the impairment continues to increase in adulthood because the inattentive symptoms, so needing to concentrate and organise yourself, become more impairing as life gets more complex. And as you do A-levels and then university and then go through working life, you often lose the scaffolding, the support structure of living at home and having teachers chasing you and parents chasing you and nagging you. And actually, it's much more complex dealing with living on your own, having bills, having shifts to turn up for, and so on. And so if anything, it gets more impairing. So what are these inattentive symptoms? Well, it's about attention and concentration. And so they certainly have a short attention span for things that they're not interested in. They're often disorganized and inefficient, quite chaotic. They struggle to, they procrastinate a lot. So they put things off, particularly things they don't like doing, things that are repetitive or mundane or less interesting. They struggle very much with planning and prioritizing. They're often indecisive and find decision-making really quite stressful. And they're often forgetful. They might be forgetful for where they've put things, so they might lose things a lot or misplace them and spend a lot of time looking for things. They struggle with multitasking and so tend to need to focus just on one thing at a time and not get interrupted. Otherwise, it's really hard to get back on track. And yet they're very easily interrupted because they're so distractible. They have a very poor sense of time, so they might misjudge how long it takes to do something, so often hopelessly underestimate how long they need, and that contributes to them constantly being late and not finishing tasks because they often run out of time. And they often struggle to follow conversations or particularly long explanations or instructions because they'll drift off and lose concentration. And then if you look at the hyperactive symptoms, they are people who struggle to relax. So they may be on the go, fidgeting, squirming, and physically hyperactive and look hyperactive, but actually there may be more of an internal sense of restlessness. So that it's not always that obvious. It may be that their brain's very hyperactive. They've got lots and lots of thoughts. They may be talking too much, often interrupting. They might be quite a thrill seeker and have a very active lifestyle, but not necessarily. It may be that the hyperactivity, particularly in adulthood, is unseen because they're just They just have this internal sense of discomfort, of restlessness. Often they describe it as an anxiety and a level of tension and stress, and they're often very poor sleepers. And then they may or may not be impulsive, and people that are impulsive may have some disinhibited behaviours. They may be more likely to drift into substance misuse, alcohol use, illegal drugs. They're more likely to have addictive personalities. Some of the impulsivity, though, might be a bit more benign and less obvious, and it's to do with eating. And so obesity is more common in ADHD, more overeating and more aggressive behaviour. So there is a link with violence, but not all people with ADHD are aggressive. They're more likely to speak out of turn, be impatient, and maybe be inconsistent parents, but doesn't stop them being good parents. But there is a third domain of ADHD, and that's the emotional symptoms. And so this third domain isn't in the title, and it's actually not recognised very well by many doctors, let alone patients. And yet ADHD often explains the fact that they may have a lot of emotional symptoms, a temper, a short fuse. They might be overreactive and a bit oppositional, argumentative. And that's all explained by ADHD. And so they may react very quickly to things. They might be quite sensitive, oversensitive, and easily angered. And when you look at this study, it's only a little study, but the top section there is patients with ADHD, and the bottom section is controls. And the dark colours are when people rate themselves as angry. And so they're asked to rate themselves on an app every hour as to how angry they're feeling. And you can see on the right-hand side, on the top section, people with ADHD more frequently rate themselves as angry, and their mood changes a lot throughout a day. Whereas the bottom section controls, some of them are fairly calm people, even people who are up and down, as many of us are, they're less up and down than people with ADHD. So although they might have hot spots in a day and bad moments, it's less common than people with ADHD. Now, people with ADHD struggle to filter out background noises and conversations around them. They might struggle with a conversation in a pub or a public space because they can't stop being drawn to things around them that are happening, people laughing, other people on other tables talking. But they may be distracted by their own thoughts, their own negative self-talk about, have I done something wrong? Can I do my job? Am I good enough? And so on. They describe a lot of mind wandering. So having a restless mind is really common. Thoughts on the go, thoughts jumping around. Sometimes people say they have multiple thoughts at the same time. Now, ADHD would be better titled Attention Dysregulation Hyperactivity Disorder, not Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It's also badly named because you could lose the hyperactivity bit, because lots of people don't have hyperactive symptoms as an adult. But the reason it should be called dysregulation, not attention deficit, is because it's not really an attention deficit. People can focus if they're interested, but typically they get bored quickly and they'll lose focus. They may hyper-focus on something they're really excited about, but then they'll lose interest in that too. But they very much struggle when it's things that are boring or repetitive. They also struggle to regulate their mind wandering. They struggle to regulate their moods. But these features are a bit like a personality trait in the sense that they will always have been like that. It's not like a new disorder. It's not like they've become ill in any way. Now, there is a big impact of ADHD. So it starts in preschool, in that some children do have behavioural problems. And as they move through school, they may develop more academic impairment, but they might be doing good enough not to be picked up as really problematic, but they might be underachieving. They might have impairment in their social interactions. They sometimes struggle to be accepted by peers because they butt in, they talk a lot, they might be a bit intrusive. As they get to adolescence, they might be more drifting into drugs and alcohol. They may be developing more low self-esteem because of a history of being criticised for not working hard enough, not getting homework in on time, underperforming. And then as you get to adulthood, there is more impact on their jobs, more frequent job changes, maybe being sacked, maybe resigning impulsively, more impact on their relationships, more divorce and relationship failure, more drifting into drugs and crime for some people. So it has a big impact. Now, I'm rushing slightly because I'm aware of the time, but ADHD is associated with other mental health problems. And these are the ones people are more likely to be diagnosed with. So they often do get picked up for being anxious, they get picked up for being depressed, and they may get picked up by the mental health services for having addictions. And sometimes they're labelled as having a personality disorder, and some of them might, but actually very often they're misdiagnosed with a personality disorder because it's not recognised that ADHD might explain everything, including their temper. And in fact, they might not even have a depression, but they might just have some depressive symptoms. And they might not even have an anxiety disorder. That might be wrongly diagnosed. They might just be understandably anxious because they feel so overwhelmed so easily and they struggle to get on with life. Now, I'm not going to go into this in detail because I'm going to run out of time, but there is so much comorbidity, which is coexistence of other mental health disorders. And some of them are genuine comorbid disorders that may warrant treatment in their own right. They may also have problems with addictions, as I said, with tics, with learning disabilities, but many of the others, such as depression, bipolar, sometimes that's a misdiagnosis because it is not recognised enough that patients with ADHD struggle so much with their mood and with functioning in life that they may have many other symptoms, but actually it's the ADHD that may be the main disorder. Just very briefly, this is just a graph to emphasise that. If you look at the colour that's the men, for example, the substance misuse, you can see that the column for men with ADHD, which is the darker shaded column, is a much, much higher percentage there for the percentage of men that have substance misuse disorder, whereas the lighter shaded column is men without ADHD, and that is a much, much less, much smaller percentage. And the same for depression. If you have ADHD, the darker shaded columns, you're much more likely to get diagnosed with depression. And if you don't have ADHD, it's much less common. And the same for bipolar. But the concern is some of those diagnoses may not be warranted because they might be a comorbidity, but it might be a misdiagnosis because of this mood instability that's actually part of ADHD. Now, with drug treatments, a lot of the symptoms reduce, so people are more likely to stay on task, they're more productive and organised, they procrastinate less, they're more focused, they talk less or are less over-talkative, they interrupt less, they're more patient, they're often better partners, better parents, they're less impulsive and maybe can think before they talk or think before they act. And they're more able to tolerate boredom. There's lots of benefits of the drugs and they often help people function in life. And the many comments are positive following drugs. And I would say about 7 out of 8 people do well on drugs for ADHD. So it's one of those disorders that is actually very treatable and responds in many cases to drugs. So people often talk about they're not just less fidgety and restless, but they can manage to get through work. They may be sleeping better. Their moods are more stable. Getting on with domestic tasks. And just a couple more slides now, we're nearly finished, but there's a lot of national registry studies coming out of Sweden because they have big national databases following their population closely, which we don't have here. But what these studies have shown is that there's a huge rate for people who are on ADHD drugs of having a reduction in really important outcomes like criminal offending. 30% or more reductions in reoffending, and violent reoffending, more than 40% reduction. Depression, often 20% or more less symptoms of depression, and suicidality about 11% less. Substance misuse maybe about 1/3 less if people are treated for their ADHD with ADHD drugs. Transport accidents about halved. You're more likely to have a road traffic accident if you have ADHD because you might be inattentive, you might be careless, or you might be rushing. You might be more likely to be impatient and speeding. You're more likely to drive through a red light, and you're more likely to have a road traffic accident. And yet on medication, that might be reduced by over 1/2. Men are likely to have fewer sexually transmitted diseases because they're more likely to put a condom on. They're more likely to plan. They're more likely to think ahead. They're more likely to be, have a bit of self-control and reduce their chance of getting a sexually transmitted disease by about 40% or more. And there are fewer injuries and emergency ward visits, and higher educational attainment for people with ADHD who take an ADHD drug, and also higher scores on general well-being. Now, prescribing is increasing, and I won't go into that graph in great detail, except to say it's loads more in boys than in girls, more so than is justified, really. Girls are hugely undertreated. And when you look at older age groups, so the graph lines that are further down on that scale, so the very bottom one is the older people, 25 to 45 years old, there's very little prescribing going on. And yet most of people don't grow out of ADHD. And so it's hugely undertreated in adults. So probably about 1 in 1,000 adults in the UK are on treatment. And yet 20 in 1,000 probably have ADHD, which is your 2%, at least 2% of adults have ADHD. So there's probably 19 out of 20 people out there with ADHD who are not on treatment. And our record in the UK for treating it is appalling. So we're the yellow line right down the bottom. The only country less than us is Japan in terms of their prescribing rates. Now there's lots going on in America, and it may be that they overdiagnose a little bit. And maybe the Scandinavian countries there in the middle, maybe they're getting it about right. But certainly we are prescribing massively too little. So to summarise, it is common ADHD, it's very impairing, and it's hugely misunderstood, not just by people in general, but sadly by a lot of doctors. And it impacts men enormously in every part of their life, their working life, their social life, domestically, and their relationships. And hopefully you've just had a little summary of what ADHD is and how it affects men and how treatment can change their lives for the better. So that's my talk done. I'm sorry we're running behind slightly. What I'll do is during the next few talks, I'll have a look at the chat, and if anyone has got questions, then I'll try and answer it without interrupting talks too much. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope I didn't rattle through that too quickly.
Super. Thank you, Dr. Cubbin. Much appreciated. Thank you for such an informative talk. For me personally, ADHD was something I'd heard about, but in all honesty, I knew very, very little of, and I think that was probably evident when we had the conversation before today. But today's event was certainly part of an awareness event as much as anything, and I certainly believe that you've helped us to help raise awareness of such an important issue. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. Particularly thank you for sharing that associated coexisting conditions that you shared, because for me it highlights the breadth of mental health that we should be thinking about and considering today. So again, thank you for sharing your expertise, and thank you for sharing your vast experience with us today. Much, much appreciated.
Thanks very much for
Okay. So thank you again, Dr. Cubbin. Just a reminder of that auction that we have today, the link that I shared earlier in the box, in terms of the auction that Oxfordshire Mind have put together to try and raise a little bit additional to the £660 that we raised from today's event. So next up, our speaker is going to be talking lots of bollocks, excuse my French, in terms of the way that a boxer short brand, or an extended brand of boxer shorts now, I'm sure you're going to hear, is supporting men's health. Daren Elsley is a local entrepreneur, a good friend, and a founder of Bollox, a quality brand of men's boxer shorts supporting men's cancer charities. It was founded in 2013, and Bollox has a vision to provide men with more knowledge about their health, as well as giving you a new fashionable look. Now, Daren's going to be sharing his journey with his brand and also share some thoughts around men's health issues today that he's kindly supporting. And I will simply hand over to Daren. Over to you, Daren.
Thanks, Mike, for that, and thanks for letting me talk for Men's International Day. I just want to share a screen because I've got a few slides to show you, and it'll help me hopefully do a better presentation. So bear with me that hopefully. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, as Mike said, I'm Daren Elsley, and I'm the founder and owner of Bollox. So what I want to do to sort of like for my little pitch was to just explain why I started the brand what led me to it, where it's taken me over the last 6-7 years, where we are now, and then to go on again talk about men's health, which the whole idea of the whole concept of the brand is to improve the conversation starter for men. So let me just see if I can get. So this is Peter Fiddler. He was my best friend for 30 odd years. This is Peter when he was 38 years old, and like I say, we've been friends for many years. He was married with a son. Peter was 38 when he was diagnosed with bowel cancer, and 2 years after that, this is Peter on our 40th birthday, and unfortunately Peter died about two months after his 40th birthday. So massively affected me, because I hadn't really been involved in anyone with cancer or anything up until that point. So that was a huge part in my life. So when Peter died, obviously, I think what a lot of people do, they just decide to go and do something for a charity. I'd never really done much with charities before in my life. I had my own little bubble, and I was quite happy. So for whatever reason, a couple of my friends decided to do doing a London to Brighton off-road bike ride. So I said to him, I'll come and join you, and I do it for the British Heart Foundation. Not too sure why I did it for that, but it was what I did it for. So that's about a 75-mile ride. Took me about 5 or 6 hours. But during that ride, I had huge amounts of thinking time, because all you're doing is just pedaling and pedaling and pedaling. And I realized that for me, although I felt good because I was doing something for charity, I just thought there's no way I'm going to keep doing things for charity. I will eventually lose that kind of interest or drive, maybe like most people. So for me, I wanted to create something that would consistently and cleverly remind people to be aware of their health, because fundamentally what happened to Peter was he had irritable bowel. He should have gone to he went to the doctors. He should have gone to the hospital to have a camera up his backside just to check, but he didn't want to go, and he cancelled it. So because of fear, lack of awareness, whatever you want to call it, he never went. And then 2 years later, he found out he had secondary cancer in his pleura, and then it went to his brain. But so if Peter had actually, maybe, you don't know, but if Peter had gone to the and had the check, he may be still with us today. So that's what I wanted to do. So really, after that bike ride, my sort of journey began. I came home, I said to the wife, I got this silly idea that I want to start to raise men's cancer awareness through a pair of boxer shorts. I want to call them Bollox. To me, it's a fantastic name. It encapsulates what we're trying to do, the message I want to get across. It's right in your face. It's not pussyfooting around the subject, and it'll get the conversation started. But I didn't realize I was going to have such a journey to get it trademarked. The battles I've had to go through to prove it's not an offensive word, even though everyone uses it on a day-to-day basis, and a lot worse than that. But I'm quite a stubborn fella, and I wanted to do it in memory of Peter. So I just kept pushing, but eventually the Intellectual Property Office did actually capitulate, and they let me trademark the word bollocks for underwear. So I always say many people talk bollocks, but I actually own it now. So I'm well pleased with that. And if Peter had been here during this journey, Peter would have absolutely loved it, because he was a bit of an entrepreneur and a bit of a kind of Del Boy type fella. So that was it. So that was 7 years ago, and the brand has been developing for that time, more in the last 12 to 18 months. I've now, it's my full-time job. And so now we've got seven colorways. We've grown it from being an evening and sort of part-time cottage industry now to, it's actually a serious business, and it's paying, we're VAT registered. I'm actually employing I've got someone on a part-time. I would say in the next few months it'll be a full-time person. 2021 is going to be a very exciting year for the brand. But for me, the whole what I get excited about is the message it's giving. So in every box, there's a little pamphlet that goes in there, and so once you open up and you look at your Bollox boxer shorts, this will drop out, and then we've sold roughly around about 15. I think we've sold about 15,000 units so far. So for me, I know that 15,000 guys has seen that leaflet, been through it. Some of them would have resonated. Some of them would have sort of hit home. So, well, actually, I've got that sign. I've got that symptom. And you never know. We may have saved some lives, and people may have got an earlier diagnosis for a condition, which fundamentally is what the whole brand was about. So I think it's doing its job. So that's sort of like a little bit about me, and I didn't want to bang on about what about Bollox because it is about International Men's Day. So let's talk a little bit about men's health and actually what the actual boxer shorts represent. So for men's cancers, you've obviously got the three main cancers, which is prostate, testicular, and penile. For most men, I'm quite lucky. I don't mind. I'm quite comfortable with my body, and I don't mind. I would go to the doctors, but I think for a lot of men, it's a very delicate, sensitive area. Not many men want to, if they have got a symptom or a sign, they will bury it. There's a collection of embarrassment, fear, and it's like I say, it's a sensitive area. Men aren't generally used to going to a doctor and getting out their tackle and having it looked at, and so there's a huge fear. You're less likely to sort of talk to your friends about it because you don't sit around the pub. You talk about football. You talk about being a bloke. You talk about being hard. You know, you talk about sex, but you don't talk about actually. I think I might have a lump in my ball, or I wake up a lot during the night to go to the toilet, or I find it hard to have an erection. All these things, which are signs and symptoms, men just do not talk about it. Whereas conversely, from my own experience with a wife and two daughters, they generally talk about their health, their sexual health, much more freely than men do. So they're effectively the three men's cancers. What I wanted to do is I was going to show you a lot of slides with the signs and the symptoms, but I thought I wanted to give something a bit more powerful. So we're going to go through some very quick slides, just with a rough idea of the sort of the amount of people who are involved who get cancers. But afterwards, we're going to go have some videos, and I find that when you listen to the videos, particularly the one from a guy called Ollie, if that doesn't make you take action and go out and seek information, then nothing will. No amount of PowerPoint presentations, because it is a very powerful video he does. But if we just quickly go through prostate cancer, 130 cases is diagnosed every day for prostate cancer, and that's predominantly one of the biggest. It is the biggest men's cancer killer. It's very, very tricky to know you've got it. It's generally like regarded as an old man's disease because you need to go to the toilet a bit more. Your wee isn't as strong, your flow isn't as strong. But around 47,000 men are diagnosed with prostate cancer each year, and of that, 11,000 generally die. And like I say, that's because of where it's located. It's deep within inside your body, and the only time you really know you've got a problem is when it has started to grow, and depending on which way it grows, if it grows forward, then it does start affecting your bladder and obviously your penis. But if it grows, there are cavities in the body. If it grows the other way, it's less it's harder to diagnose. But like I say, I didn't want to give you too much information about the signs and the symptoms because when you've watched the videos, I think you will go away, and there are charities out there that will give you all the information you need, and I think from these videos you will go and seek that information. Testicular cancer We all love our balls. Most men love their balls. Generally, most men will sit there in the evenings with their hands down their pants, watching the TV, but they're not really checking themselves. They just quite enjoy the feel of having their balls there, and it's a weird thing, but we all do it. Or is it just me? I do it anyway. But on a serious note, 24,000 men will be diagnosed with testicular cancer in the UK, and around that, 60 will die as a result of the disease. The reason why it's there is the survival rate is very high, mainly because you're more aware of it. It's obviously on the outside of your body, so the more we can talk about it, the more you can be aware of it, the more you are going to a doctor, and that's the result. So, but again, 60 people is still too many. So we have testicular cancer there. Penile cancers. Wasn't too sure what picture to put up there, so I thought I'll put a little sausage up there. Hope it doesn't offend too many people, but I couldn't put a penis up there, otherwise Mike will be telling me off. But if it ends up looking like that, then you seriously should have gone to the doctors way before it gets to that point. But nevertheless, there are around about 550 cases in the UK each year, and it is commonly affects men over 60. But it is very, very rare. But nevertheless, again, it is like with most men, you don't want to be going to the doctors and telling them you've got a sore or a rash on your penis. You hide it and you don't want to tell anybody. So they are the three main cancers. So, like I say, rather than doing a presentation with lots of data, for me, it's just if you listen and you learn and you remember from these videos, particularly from Ollie, it's International Men's Day. So after you finish today, just spend 15 minutes, look on those, go to those websites I'm going to talk about, and just become aware of what they're telling you, and educate yourself about men's health. So with further ado, I'm going to give you, this is Ollie Plummer. I've only met Ollie about 2 weeks ago. His auntie bought him a pair of Bollox boxer shorts. He absolutely loves them. He contacted me and said, oh, he'd like to be an ambassador for the brand. And so I had a chat with him. I asked him if he'd do a little video for this. And he's completely honest about what's happening with him right at the moment. He had his testicle removed only last week. So this is him recovering, and he videoed this only a couple of days ago. So I'll let you listen to Ollie.
Hi, my name is Ollie Plummer, and recently I got diagnosed with testicular cancer. And just a couple weeks ago, I had surgery to remove one of my testicles. I had this done because initially I found a small pea-sized lump just on the base of one of my balls. And then when I was comparing it to the other one, I noticed it was a little harder and just didn't feel quite the same as the other. So I went to visit my GP. Around the week, 10 days later, I kind of monitored it a little bit, and nothing had changed, and went to get it checked out. And you know, for me, I'm at two ends of the spectrum. So a couple of years ago, I also was diagnosed with cancer, and for months I was just not really feeling myself. I was having a lot of symptoms and signs that I naively ignored or chose to ignore, and things got quite bad. Things metastasized, they'd spread, and I had to have chemotherapy, which was grueling and really, really tough. So we're now a couple of years down the line, and you know, the first little sign that I noticed, and I regularly check down there, and I noticed this little pea-sized lump. And because I'd had my previous history, I've got this heightened, you know, caution around me, you know. So I was really quick to get it checked out, and monitored it closely. And, you know, I'm so pleased that I did. I've had this surgery, which has been tough and difficult, but things were contained. And with testicular cancer, you can have the surgery and move on. So for me, I've come from one place and I've come from another place, sort of opposite ends of the spectrum. And I just now have such a great understanding and appreciation for checking your body, because it can save your life.
So for me, when Ollie did that, that is just so much more powerful than any other data you can go. If that doesn't make you want to go and be aware of your own body, find information out from all the charities that are out there, so people just don't go through what are less likely to go through what Ollie's been through. I'd also like to, at the beginning of the PowerPoint, I mentioned that the reason I started this whole venture with Bollox was Peter, and this is Peter with his son Harrison, and Harrison was 5 when Peter died. For me, I don't know Harrison very well. I probably know Harrison a lot more if Peter had stayed alive. But oddly, we were going to have this at the Hilton Hotel, and Harrison works at the Hilton Hotel. So it's all gone full circle. And so I contacted Harrison, who's now 18, and I just said to him, do you fancy just giving us an overview of what it's been like without your dad? Again, it's just to add to that powerful message that you can get across. So this is Harrison just doing a minute of just some thoughts about what's in it, about his life without his dad. So again, I'll just let you listen to Harrison for a minute.
Hi, I'm sure Daren let you know why I'm here, so we'll jump in. But it's hard to say how life's been impacted by the loss of my dad. Seeing as I was so little at the time, I don't really remember much about him. When you've got one single parent that has to now do twice the amount of jobs because they're now on their own looking after a 5-year-old, you have to grow up quick. So it affected me in all sorts of ways, but I think I had to grow up faster to make sure that we could survive. So if I can leave you all with a message, I would say that no matter how this affects you and no matter who you lose, if you do lose anyone, don't let it stop you. They would want you to remember them, love them and respect them, but also grow from it. And it's not a fairy tale, and it doesn't always go your way, but I can say that it is still important to learn from it. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, for me that was seeing Harrison do that after because I knew his dad so well. I can see Peter in Harrison so much. So for me, it's quite passionate. It impacts me quite a lot. But as I said, I think those videos for me. If it's International Men's Day, so from those videos, especially at Ollie's, you can go and get all that information from the men's cancer charities. There are 2 sort of main men's cancer charities, which one is Orchid and one is Prostate Cancer UK. They're sort of like the UK's leading charities. For me and for Bollox, I have tried to keep it sort of like fairly local. So we donate money, and I know UCare, which is based in Oxford, and it's in the bag. UCare were with me from the start really, and they do actually an amazing job and they deal with urological issues. So that does cover bladder and kidney cancers. So that does involve obviously women, but they obviously do the other 3 men's cancers. So again, I think the UK, all UK charities need support at this particular time. So what I asked UK to do is if they would actually like to do a video for us. So they sent me a video really just to showcase them, and again just to reinforce the message about self-checking and self-awareness. So this is a bit of VT from UCare, which again, I'll let you have a watch of it. It's only I gotta say a minute or two long, just to reinforce that message.
UCare provide information and education about urological cancers. Over 360,000 people have been diagnosed with cancer every year in the UK. However, 42% of patients could have prevented the cancer in the first place. Public awareness is woefully low. The UK community team provide information and education about urological cancers. By raising awareness, we can reduce the stigma that is attached to some of the symptoms that people experience, and in this way, encouraging people to go and see their GP more quickly. It is really important to realise that there have been improvements in the survival rates that we have seen over the last 30 years. This has been for a number of reasons, including public awareness campaigns, but also the screening campaigns that have been so effective. We also work with health professionals and GPs to support their services. We need all the money that we can get. Every pound makes a difference. UCare provides
So I would say if you want to support, if you want to hear something, then obviously consider UCare. They're a lovely charity. If you need any leaflets on it, then I've got some leaflets. So if you can always message me, and I will gladly send you some leaflets on it. Or alternatively, go onto the UCare website, and they've got leaflets like this one here, which tells you about how to check your balls, and you do it on a monthly basis. They cover all the urological cancers. So a great source of information, which you can easily get hold of. So you can always shout to me or just go onto their website, which is there. So the final message for me really is, again, it's the UCare message, is raising awareness and talking about the symptoms will help to break down barriers and allow earlier detection and earlier reassurance. And the earlier that cancer is detected, the better the outcomes. And that really underpins the whole reason why I started Bollox. I really want to just get the conversation started that men can have with themselves, they can have with their wives, and also parents can have with their children, because testicular cancer affects from 15 years old upwards. So that's about it for me, really. So for me, support the brand, support the cause. If you fancy buying a pair of Bollox boxer shorts, that's the website to go to. I am a little bit short of stock at the moment because it's been absolutely mental, but next week I'm getting a load more coming in. So that's it. So thank you for listening to me. I'm happy to take some questions if we're allowed questions, or if not, it's been lovely having a platform. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daren. Much appreciated. Just in view of time, I just ask you to, if you've got a question, drop it into the chat, and then Daren can respond on the chat there. That would be much appreciated. Not to sort of devalue the conversation, but hopefully you appreciate that in terms of keeping it on time. But thank you, Daren. Thank you for sharing that super powerful presentation. Really, really, really appreciated. I know from our conversations as friends in the network that how Peter really influenced your strong purpose, and how that's really influenced the way that you've launched this brand. Thank you for sharing your journey. Obviously, for sharing some of those signs that we should look out for. I think the piece for me was, the impactful videos that you shared there. And a couple of people have said that in the comments already. Some super impactful videos. And I'm going to talk about the leaflet in a moment. But what I will share is the boxer shorts. Everybody should wear the boxer shorts. So please do. I know Mr. Mabbott on the screen as well has a pair of boxer shorts on today. I'm not going to ask him to share them. It's his choice. But again, let's look at supporting the Bollox brand and helping Daren there. But it's super that you've committed also to give a percentage of your revenue. Really respect that, to percent of your revenue to men's health research. So again, much appreciated. So thank you again, Daren. Just before I hand over to our next speaker, I just want to sort of build on something Daren was talking about, which is our confidence to go to our GP, etc. And Daren said that he's quite confident and all that sort of stuff. I personally am not. And some of you won't know this, and there's a gentleman in the room with us today called Chris. Chris runs a number of like chat conversations from his shed called the Man from the Shed. Fantastic. And he invited me the other day to talk about this, and I couldn't. And I said I'd share it today. So since knowing Daren and buying some of his box shorts and getting one of the leaflets, it encouraged me to check myself a little bit more regularly. In August, I turned 50, and in no coincidence, the day after my 50th birthday, I had my most horrible day. I discovered that I had a 1 centimetre lump on the base of my testicle, and it spooked me out, massively spooked me out. And actually, I blamed it on COVID, not going to my GP. I couldn't interrupt my GP, and it took me a few weeks before actually making that appointment to go. What was I worried about? Well, I was probably worried about standing in front of my GP, male or female, and I guess exposing yourself for that all-important check. But I have to say, and if there's a reason of sharing this with you, is not for your sympathy, but for you to share this next experience with everybody you know, that I would hope you would be able to pass on and give people the confidence to do it if they need to do it. Because what surprised me is how my privacy was respected at every single moment. So when I went to my GP, the only piece I had to expose to myself, I didn't even have to get undressed. The only piece I had to expose was the testicle that I was concerned about. When I went to nettlebed surgery for my ultrasound test, yes, I had to lay on a couch, but this time I had paper over me, and the only piece that was exposed was, again, the testicle that they were concerned about. And yes, they did check the other testicle. So I share that with you, like I say, not for sympathy, but if you have a concern, if you have somebody else that's a concern, please don't be afraid as I was. Please, I urge you or one of your friends to get checked as soon as possible. So again, thank you, Daren. Thank you for sharing that expert and powerful piece with us. Much appreciated. Our next speaker, again, is something a little bit different, and it's Nicola Whybrow. Nicola is going to talk about your personal style, and many of you know that I love personal styling and personal brand, etc. And Nicola is an award-winning personal stylist based in Oxfordshire. She's trained with market leaders House of Colour, and she blends her personal styling expertise with her professional teaching career to equip those with whom she works with the toolkit to dress authentically with intention and ease every single day. The way we dress speaks volumes to the world, and Nicola helps connect our inner values and personality with our outer appearance to ensure that our message to the world is authentic and consistent. Nicola, thank you for joining us today, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Before I begin, can I just really quickly jump on the Bollox conversation? Because I just want to raise awareness, actually, while I've got a captive audience of men, about boys, because my nephew was actually diagnosed with testicular cancer at the age of 3. And we spotted that by chance because he had his pants off, as 3-year-olds do, running around playing in a paddling pool. It's easy to overlook that in children. So just while we're sharing those thoughts, let's just raise awareness for children as well. Thank you. Right, so personal style, something very different. I do want to screen share at some point, but not from the beginning. Is that okay, Mike? Okay. So I'm Nicola Whybrow. I'm an image consultant, and I work out of my studio in Bicester. I work in businesses, and I also work with people online. With a background in teaching, I'm all about helping people to be the best that they be, achieving potential and increasing success. So why is your style worth speaking about? Surely it's just a matter of getting up and getting dressed every morning. That would be the basic legal requirement for leaving the house. But there is so much more to consider. We're conditioned to interpret dress and draw conclusions about that person. Rightly or wrongly, we make assumptions about what we see. Clothes have always been used to make a statement. For example, prison uniform. That was designed to strip away all identity and individuality, and it's used as a form of impression. Company uniforms. They're designed to make a statement about the company, to identify brand values. Police and military uniforms, they're used to portray rank, authority, and call for respect. The clothes we wear subliminally speak volumes about who we are and what we're about. So what do your clothes say about you? Is that message aligned to how you want to be perceived? Does it reflect your personality, your skills, your values, who you really are? When we meet people in person or typically now online, we intend to make an impact. That's what we want to do. We want to engage that person, especially if those people are potential clients. Of the impact that we make, a whopping 67% of that impression, that impact is visual. Only 28% is due to the tone of our voice, and only 5% is attributed to what we say. So there's no denying how big a value our visual representation is. As visual beings, we process and retain information about what we see far more efficiently than what we hear and what we read. So your image is pivotal to the impact that you make. For optimum impact, we need to maximize each of those communication channels. To be heard and valued, we need to be seen. We need to be visible. We need to be memorable. I help you to do that, to nail that 67% impact value. I work with men and women to give them the toolkit to build a workable wardrobe to suit every aspect of their profession and personal lifestyle. You will learn how to dress for your individuality. We have colours that we look good in and colours that make us look ill. I help you to differentiate between those. We then learn how to dress your body shape, your proportions, and your personality. So you're dressing entirely your individual you to be authentic. Daily dressing with purpose becomes effortless and shopping a doddle. The way we dress is significantly deeper than chucking on a set of clothes. It's your personal brand. It's your authentic self, the very core of who you are. The thing that attracts you, the thing that makes you attractive to your clients. In a world of running our own businesses, never before has articulating your personal brand been so important for your success. In this crazy year that is 2020, more of us than ever are working from home. It's tempting to resort to loungewear. Of course, there's a time and place for this, but it's important to maintain your professional image when you're working from home. I thought it would be useful to share some tips for maximising your professional image when working virtually. Of course, we've got the practical elements, for example, your frame. So when you're on camera in a situation like this and speaking with potential clients, you have this space here to portray yourself and your values. So everything that you put into that space will either add, enhance your professional image, or it would detract from it. So think carefully about what's in your space. We've all been privy to lots of people's environments since lockdown 1. We've all had insights into BBC News reporters and news correspondents' bedrooms and lounges and all sorts of things. I don't know about you, but I've witnessed everything from gin bottles to dirty laundry. It's all representative of you. So keep a tidy corner. That's all you need. Your space to represent who you are. When you show up on camera, show up as if you would in person. If it's not something you would wear to a meeting in person, it's not how you should show up on camera either. So there is a place for pajamas and it's in bed. So also use colour to increase your visibility. As we look at screens, we're often just overwhelmed with a sea of neutrals, lots of blacks and greys, and we need to stand out in that environment. So use colour carefully. It's important to stand out for the right reasons. Colour increases your visibility. Invisibility increases your people being attended to you, bringing attention to you. So I just want to very quickly show you a couple of slides to illustrate. Let's see if I can do this without any faff. Okay, so we're going to have a little game of spot the difference in terms of colour and the impact it makes. So here is one of my clients. He's happy for me to share these photos to illustrate the point. So in there, he is wearing blue shirts. One blue shirt on the left, one blue shirt on the right. He's also wearing a blue jacket. So a blue shirt and a blue jacket is a blue shirt and a blue jacket, right? Not quite so. So if we have a look at the picture on the left, he's wearing brighter blues, he's wearing brighter blues there in the shirt and the jacket. He's looking vibrant, he's looking fresh, he's looking energized, healthy, he looks alert, he looks in focus, he looks approachable, and he grabs our attention. Comparatively, the photo on the right, the same person, he looks a bit washed out, he looks tired, he looks blotchy, he looks less visible to us. And in fact, these pictures were taken literally moments apart in the time it took him to change his clothes. So if we try to look down the centre of that photograph, we're immediately drawn to him on the left. So wearing good colours for you keeps you in focus, keeps you visible, grabs the attention so people will listen and hear what you've got to say. So my biggest tip is to wear a good colour that stands out and that works for you, okay? If you don't know which colours those are, just wear something bright, wear something that will make you stand out, wear something that people give you compliments on. This is my husband. He lacks lots of, he doesn't have much hair. He therefore needs to add some other interests. So in order to get his attention, So he's done that through his glasses. He's got a good colour on for him, and he's also wearing the glasses. Now, this last slide I want to show you is, you probably recognise him. It's actor Javier Bardem. On the left, we see him as himself, dressed in clothes of his own accord. They clearly work for him. He looks very clear. His skin looks clear. He looks defined. He looks approachable. He's certainly in the right colours for him, and it creates an impact. He is somebody that we feel we can approach. He's very visible and in focus. On the right, however, this is him playing Raoul Silva in Skyfall. And this is a classic case of being in the wrong colours. So he's wearing all these hues of brown, which would look actually really good on me. But on him, they have this really negative impact. So this is Hollywood using their knowledge of colour to strengthen his character. Those colours make him look quite sinister. They make him look untrustworthy. They make it believable that he is somebody that we don't want to deal with. So colour makes a massive difference to the way that you appear to people and the way that people perceive you. Okay, so just to finish off, your image counts. Dressing with purpose in your colours and style will positively impact your self-confidence and performance, and will enhance people's perceptions of you. Have I got time for a little poem to finish? Just sort of summarises what I do. Okay, so this is written by myself. This is the teacher in me. So, as an image consultant, what do I maintain? I get people dressed. Let me explain. In a competitive world, we need to stand out, demonstrate who we are without having to shout. The way we dress speaks volumes to those who we meet. Make sure your state, I'm confident, competent, trustworthy, elite. When 67% of a first impression is visual, it's not what we say, but our image that's decisional. People by people, it's important to be you. In the right colours and style, to your clients, you'll be true. Dress in the real you, your presence and brand will boom. Be the most visible and memorable person on the Zoom. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you for finishing out with that lovely poem. Thank you. Really appreciate your time with us today and talking about personal style. I've seen the impact myself. I won't let you all critique me, but I've seen the impact it changed in terms of the way I dressed and the way I consider my personal brand. And thank you for sharing those spot the difference, because I think it really highlights the impact of choosing the right colour for the right person and the right textures, etc. So really appreciate a really powerful way of sharing your expertise with us today. So again, much appreciated, and thank you again for sharing your expertise and sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
So thank you again, Nicola, and thank you to our speakers so far. Now, I'm delighted to welcome the CEO of our charity today, Oxfordshire Mind, Dan Knowles, and Dan's going to talk around mental health and some of the issues related. And Oxfordshire Mind is the charity that we're all supporting today, and as an organisation that firmly believe that everyone who has mental health difficulties should have somewhere to turn to for advice and support. They exist to literally make that happen. And on his LinkedIn profile, Dan shares our vision: we won't give up until everyone experiencing a mental health problem gets support and respect. Dan, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, no, thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's great to be here. Thank you for supporting us. Nicola, I thought I would share, I'm wearing a polo, sort of awesome colours. I don't know what that says, but I'm drinking a beer as well, because I like beer, so you can tell that about me. But if you look carefully, it's Old Speckled Hen low alcohol, which means I am trying to take some sort of care and attention over my body as well. To be honest, it tastes a bit like cold tea. It doesn't really work, but it kind of, it's helping me pretend that I'm having a nice Thursday evening. Yes, and thank you for that introduction. Now I'm going to share the screen. Oh crikey, if I can work out how to do that. How do I do that? How do I do that?
Green button at the bottom.
Oh, down at the bottom, share screen, brilliant. And then should be able to see. So I've got a few slides. Is that coming up? Yeah, okay, I can see some nodding heads. Thank you. No, that's great. So yes, our vision is we won't give up until everyone experiencing a mental health problem gets both support and respect. That's Oxfordshire Mind. And we do a wide range of activities. We have about 200 members of staff. We have 70 active volunteers that work with us, and we help 30,000 people in Oxfordshire every year. So it's a really, it's a significant part of the landscape, I suppose, in this county. I've been doing my role for 4 years now. I enjoy it very much. I think it's an amazing group. I used to work in corporate life in Pepsi and John Lewis and various other different places, and I've really enjoyed making the transition into charity work for all sorts of different reasons that you could ask me if you want. I am planning on trying to leave a few minutes at the end for questions if that's if we get there. But we have houses that we look after people who've been sectioned and had breakdowns and are sort of transitioning back into society. We have a wellbeing service, so we have 60 peer support groups every week. We have programs that concentrate on younger people. We have an information line, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in a minute. That's currently taking 40 calls a day, and that's record highs, partly driven by coronavirus. And we work very closely with the NHS on improving access to psychological therapies. So that's 12,000 people in Oxfordshire who get NHS approved support with anxiety and depression. We're a campaigning organisation, and we have a development and fundraising arm that brings in about £500,000 a year that helps us do, more of what we're trying to do. So just a very quick summary on who we are as an organisation. So a couple of, high-level thoughts on what are the mental health impacts of COVID-19. So more than half of adults and 2/3 of young people said their mental health got worse during the first lockdown. 72% of young people said loneliness made their mental health worse, and a lower percentage amongst people aged over 65. 1 in 4 people who tried to access mental health support couldn't get there. And the bottom right-hand one, you remember earlier on in lockdown, a lot of people were sort of trying to not put the NHS or other services under pressure. So a lot of people didn't reach out for support because of that. And at that time, a lot of us were very worried about the fact that mental health issues in particular, if you get them early, if you nip them in the bud, they can turn into small problems, not big problems. And we are starting to see in our services a significant increase in the acuity level of people who are coming to us and asking for help, which I think is one of the impacts of the coronavirus. And why is that the case? I think the screen sort of talks for itself. There's all sorts of good reasons why coronavirus has had a significant impact. I think it's really important to note that not everyone has been affected equally. So younger people, women, non-white people have been hit hard, and a few others that I'll talk about in a minute. But in overall terms, the general public's mental health dipped around lockdown, but it's actually remained quite stable. So the UK has remained quite stable. Across the population, younger people have been harder hit. Key workers in the NHS, care workers and others, and people who live alone have seen the biggest dips in their mental health. And people who've already had existing mental health problems have been affected the most. So it's exacerbated existing challenges, and particular concerns about people with OCD, personality disorders, and eating disorders. There has been a rise in domestic violence as well, which is something that a lot of us work on. And specifically, it's entrenching existing inequalities. So people with mental health problems are typically poorer, more isolated, and less physically well. And those challenges are being exacerbated through the coronavirus. So in Oxfordshire, we would look at areas like Abingdon, Caldercott, or Blackbird Leys in Oxford, or certain areas in Didcot and Banbury and Bicester as areas that we want to really understand how those people are doing and how they're feeling. And then this slide is about deprivation and death rate from coronavirus. So the 10th decile on the right-hand side there, you are much more likely to die from coronavirus if you come from a socially deprived part of our population than if you're not. And that's something that people are trying to understand and unpick. It goes with lifestyle, and various other challenges. But when we talk about coronavirus exacerbating existing inequalities, this is one example. And this is another which is looking at ethnicity. And in the middle, you see the Black Caribbean figure. The orange bar is actual hospital deaths, and the blue bar is where you would expect deaths to be for that ethnic group, given where they live and their age. And you'll see that Black people in particular are much more likely to die from coronavirus. And this is something that has given the NHS a lot of pause for thought. Is that about institutional racism? Is there some underlying health condition? Is it something else? And we're trying to understand that at the moment. But we noticed a real deterioration in the service users for Oxfordshire Mind from non-white backgrounds. I'm trying to stop using that term BAME, but for people from non-white backgrounds based around the Black Lives Matter and this analysis coming out in the NHS that happened in the summer this year. I thought this slide, I'd just bring something slightly more sort of local to the mind, so to this group. So this is a chart that shows contacts to the Oxfordshire Mind Information Service by month, going from April 2019 forward to September 2020. And you'll see in April 2020, when lockdown happened, we were seeing half the number of people come to see us. GP surgery saw the same, cancer referral services in the NHS saw the same. Everyone just stopped doing everything. Started to increase in May, and then in June you can see getting back to normal levels. September is the biggest month we've ever had. October didn't quite reach that, but November is looking like it's going to be going to exceed September. So people thinking about, you know, the post-coronavirus surge, well, it's definitely here. I think the other thing that's really interesting is that the light blue are people calling the information line, and everything else is digital interaction in one way, shape or form, emails, texts, web sheet downloads, other contacts to the website. So it's just sort of indicative that we've seen a massive digital shift, and I don't think that's going to go away. And we as an organisation are seeing a significant increase in demand to us. And then I just wanted to sort of highlight some of the gender differences that we see in the population. And the first is for women. And if there's been one area of real deterioration in the UK general public's mental health, it's amongst 16 to 24-year-old women in the UK. So the chart on the left shows a trebling in self-harm in that group from 2000 to 2014. That's a peer research journal. And on the right-hand side is NHS digital information, screening positive for PTSD. And again, you'll see that the 16 to 24-year-old female group has more than twice the levels of PTSD than any other group in the UK. So as we sort of think about the impact of technology, social media, and the changing nature of our society, it's that group that has that has seen the biggest deterioration in their mental health. On the other hand, this is International Men's Day, suicide rates amongst men are significantly higher than amongst women. So this is Office for National Statistics going back to 1983. The yellow is men, the blue is the average across both genders, and the dark blue is women. And you'll see that men are 3 times more likely to take their own lives than women. Over time, that has been declining, but since about 2007, we're seeing the figures start to increase again. Early indications are that coronavirus hasn't had a significant impact on suicide rates in the UK population. So sort of a rare moment of good news, if you like, in that statistic. And then again, if when we start to zero in on that data, middle-aged men are significantly, the most likely age category. So men aged 40 to 59. I'm 50 years old, so I fit firmly right in the middle of that one. And middle-aged men with lower incomes are 10 times more likely to die from suicide than men with higher incomes. So those of us who work in suicide prevention activities, that's very much where we tend to focus our work. And then I wanted to finish, as I say, I'd be very happy to take any questions. I wanted to finish, if I may, with a short video of a wonderful chap called Ali, who ran up Snowdon 6 times consecutively, raising money for Oxfordshire Mind in memory of a friend and colleague of his. So I'm just going to play this. I won't play the whole thing because it's 4 minutes long, but just pick a couple of the points out.
The Snowdon 6 Ways Challenge is inclusive of 6 of the main routes up and down Snowdon. And we started in Llanberis. We ran up the Llanberis path, down the Watkin track, turned around at the bottom, came back up the Watkin path, down the Rangers path. We turned around at the bottom, we came back up the Rangers path, down the Miners track, turned around and came back up the Miners track, Then we went down the Rideau path with a lovely ridge. Then we turned around at the bottom of the Rideau path, came back up the Rideau path and down the pig track. At the pig track, me and my support crew all got together. We turned around and we ran back up the pig track and finished back down in Llanberis. Back in March this year, we tragically lost Milo, an old friend and colleague of mine who sadly took his own life. I decided to run the Snowden 6 Ways Challenge in his memory and raising valuable funds for Oxfordshire Mind, a local mental health charity.
So there we go. So I love that video. It took the walk run took place earlier this year, and so far Ali has raised over £21,000 in memory and honour of his friend Milo. So there we go. That's me done. Mike, as I said, I think I've probably just about used my time, but maybe a few minutes if anyone's got any questions or points they want to make.
Let's break a norm and give anybody a chance to have a talk. Has anybody got a question? Remember, you have to take yourself off mute if you have a question.
Oh dear, that's awful.
That's potentially a good sign. It means you covered the information.
I'll ask just really quickly, Mike, how could I get involved more actively in Mind? I've always been a big supporter of the charity. You know the work I do, trying to support men's mental health. What kind of opportunities are there at the moment, Daniel, to get more involved? I'm in Warwick.
There's a brilliant local Mind called Coventry and Warwickshire Mind. So they cover that whole area. I know them very well. They do brilliant work. I'm sure they have a volunteering arm, as we do. They do a lot of really good work with younger people in particular. They're probably the strongest local Mind in younger people's work. So I would track down their website and get in touch and just sort of, say, here I am and I'd love to help out.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the question. And thanks, Dan. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us today. And personally, from conversations I've had with your team before today, I've been sort of blown away by the work that you and your team are doing in our local communities. And on behalf of everybody, I'd sort of like to thank you for that. It certainly highlights why we've all come together for International Men's Day in Oxfordshire and why to support the work that you're doing today. And particularly for me, that video, it shows the amazement things that people will do when they have a purpose and a strong reason. And I admire that you're doing that on a day-by-day basis to help people with mental health issues. And the vision that you have for the charity is admirable. And again, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. I can't stay.
If anybody's got any other questions, please. Brilliant. If you've got any other questions, please do drop them into the chat, and then Dan can respond to those questions on there. But again, thank you, Dan. Much appreciated. Thank you for joining us on behalf of the charity, and hopefully we're doing our bit to help you in that way.
Thank you. I would stay, but I'm afraid I've got children I've got to go and look after. So, Anne-Marie, we've met before, but hello, it's nice to see you. And thank you very much, Mike. I've really appreciated today.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming. So one of the things I wanted to also do today is to reference a journey that I went on in 2019, because personally I need to bring some closure. And many of you know me, you're good friends of me, and I appreciate your support today. And you know the journey that I took in 2019 when I took a role after leaving a fantastic job with a friend to take on something else. And it was the wrong decision in hindsight. And I went to a very dark place in 2019. And actually commuting by train every day wasn't the right environment for me to be in, for sure. I struggled a huge amount. And it wasn't until I went to one of my networking groups that I organised, and a lady called Jackie Fitzgerald stopped me in my tracks, said to me that I didn't look well. In hindsight, listening to her, she shared with me her thoughts in terms of what she saw in my characteristics and some of the signs that I was showing. And from there and afterwards, and once I guess I put my hands out that I wanted some help, I've had some fantastic support, much more than the fantastic support I had in the company I was working for. Because if I was to give you an example, the company had their mental health training about a month before, and the commercial director, in conversation with me, pointed to a poster on the wall and simply said, "You need to phone that number." No other conversation. So I said today I wanted to bring some closure, and the reason for doing that is this here is an envelope that's been on my board at home. It's addressed to my kids, and this is how dark my place was. First time I've opened it since. You can see here is a communication to my kids. My closure today is that in terms of the support I've been having, I needed to bring some closure, and I wanted to do that in a public way. So thank you for supporting me on that, and thank you for my friends in terms of supporting me during my own personal journey. So let's get back to the event. A reminder that we have the auction in aid of Oxfordshire Mind, and I've shared the link earlier. I will share that link again for those that have joined us a little bit later. Just put that in the chat again if you didn't see that. Okay. And next I would like to introduce Salim. Salim is a local entrepreneur that some of you will know already, and someone who has the most positive mindset. I think every single conversation I have with Salim, and it's normally over a beer nowadays, I leave feeling higher than I did before we met, and I'm sure that he's going to share with you today.
Giving me so to rise to now. I got to keep that up now.
But I'm sure he's going to share some of his thoughts, wisdom, and his experience. And I know he's going to be buzzing himself today because his company again won a very prestigious award in his industry of web hosting. So congratulations, Salim. Thanks for joining. Thank you for joining us. I know you're going to be talking about never stop growing. So over to you.
Absolutely. It kind of follows on from Dan's talk. Actually, we support Oxfordshire Mind through Storms, so I'm a massive fan of their work. The only thing is, after Nicola's talk, I'm kind of wishing I didn't wear white because it's like completely the wrong color for me. But I'm in it now. But yeah, so yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow on, and we talked to it at the last minute, Mike. But so thanks for fitting me in there. But it just follows on, and I wrote a little speech or a little script, so I'll go through that. So essentially, when I heard about your event for International Men's Day, I was really excited and just felt I had to get involved. Men's health, especially mental health, has been a big interest of mine for a long time now. And a lot of this has stemmed from the fact that when you look at the UK as a whole, we pretty much live in a country where all of our basic needs are met. Most of us have a roof over our heads and food available to us. We have schools, education, and a good economy. And if you want a change of career, there's the opportunity to retrain and learn new skills. In short, we have everything that we need to be anything that we want. Yet, despite all of this, we're in the midst of a depression crisis and have been for a number of years. Anxiety is rife. You can't turn anywhere without hearing about it or passing someone suffering from it. Suicide, especially for men, is at alarmingly high rates. And doctors are prescribing more pills for mental health related issues than at any time throughout history. I've known people who have lived their worst life, some to the point where they've sadly taken it. But I've also known and listened to people who are living their best life and are truly happy, fulfilled, and slowly achieving everything that they have ever wanted. So what's the difference? Why do some of us struggle day in, day out, while others seem blessed with everything their hearts could desire? I found that it isn't a question of luck, nor does it come down to privilege or circumstance. The more I observed, the more I realized that the problems of the one group are not that different from the problems of the other. Life is tough, that's a given. But if life is dealt in relatively equal measures to both, then why is the one group worse off than the other? The conclusion I reach is that there are three key differences between those who tend to live a life of negativity and those who appear to be blessed with happiness. These differences are linked to each other and have the power to affect all other areas of life. And the first of these differences is a strong sense of purpose. Dostoevsky wrote, "The mystery of human existence lies not in staying alive, but in finding something to live for." We all need purpose. We all need a reason for doing what we're doing, a reason for getting out of bed in the morning. We need our why. And that comes in all sorts of forms. Now, when I talk about purpose, I'm not talking about something necessarily that changes the world. I'm talking about something personal to you and that you love doing. For some, that may be starting up a business in an industry that they're passionate about. For some, it's going to be caring for others, teaching children, working towards a charitable goal, career goal, or fighting for a cause that you believe in. Or it may well be a variety of those at different points in their life. It's as unique to each of us as we are individuals. It's about pursuing something that you really care about, something that ignites you, finding a cause bigger than yourself. The people that I've seen thrive all tend to love and have a real passion for doing what they're doing. Nothing stops them. They push through barriers and boundaries. They take risks necessary to get them where they need to be. They work tirelessly at it and never stop. And all the time, for the most part, they're smiling. Why? Because they are doing what they truly love and what they believe in. The desire is strong. The hunger to succeed is strong. They are letting nothing get in the way or stop them. And because of that, they push themselves into situations that may be uncomfortable. After all, growth and comfort do not coexist. Those who thrive have to grow, which is the second key difference. Personal growth. But growth isn't necessarily about acquiring more knowledge, more skills, or more money. It's about unlearning our limitations. I found that the people who are happiest are usually in a constant state of growth. The challenges they face push them to dig deeper into themselves to find solutions, to regularly go outside of their comfort zone and to do things they would not ordinarily choose to do. But every time they do that and they become an obstacle, they come out a little stronger and they do it over and over again. Overcoming challenges creates inner confidence and belief in abilities that have been lying dormant. Yes, we all already have what it takes. And as we overcome these challenges, we start to see that and say, wow, I did that. And we start to wonder, what else can I do? We start to realize that our destiny is completely in our own hands and that we are fully responsible for it. And when that happens, we also realize that the only person we need to prove anything to is ourselves, which is the third key difference between those who struggle and the seemingly charmed, knowing that we have no one to prove anything to but ourselves. It's a well-accepted fact now within men's mental health that a big part of the problem is this stigma that men are supposed to be tough, that men aren't supposed to shed tears or show emotion or weakness of any form. The pressure to be accepted by like-minded peers, to conform to the expectations of society will always be a prison of fear of how one might be perceived. But as long as we think that way, we will always be imprisoned in our own minds and will never realize our full potential. Of course, guys cry. Of course, we get upset. Of course, we feel vulnerable at times. We all do. We're human. And life is tough, as we said. I don't care who you are. No one gets an easy walk in this world. You can be rich. You can be famous. From the outside, it may look like everything's perfect, but I guarantee you will still get hell thrown at you, just in a different form. To think otherwise is futile, and the biggest lie there is. It's as simple as that. The people that are happiest know this. They don't worry about showing emotion because they have enough inner belief and self-confidence to know that it doesn't matter, that someone else's opinion of them is just that, an opinion. So if we take these three observations, we can see that a lack of purpose leads to a lack of drive. A lack of drive means that we won't take risks. If we won't take risks, we cannot grow. And if we cannot grow, we cannot become our best. And as Les Brown said, if we cannot become our best, we cannot be happy. I believe that all of us have the power to live out our dreams and be truly happy and fulfilled. I do not believe that we were put on this earth to simply exist, take a purposeless emotional beating, and then die. We were born to become our best. We were born to use every tool that we have been gifted with to its fullest potential. But to achieve everything we want requires effort, commitment, persistence, courage, and above all, taking responsibility. We live in an increasingly bubble-wrapped society where so much is encouraging us to play it safe, and where it's becoming more acceptable to blame situations, circumstances, or someone else for not being where we want to be. Taking that attitude will always walk us down an alleyway of regret and lead us to a cesspit of disappointment and resentment. Never do that. And as long as we're alive, it's never too late to get what we want. The great thing about being human is that we've all been given the dignity of choice, the ability to change our direction at any given moment, and the power to shape our lives to be exactly how we want them to be. So cast aside the ropes of doubt and sail the ship out of the safety of the harbor. Embrace the challenge that separates you from the life you want. Remember, it isn't a question of luck. It isn't about privilege or circumstance. It's about you. Never stop growing, never stop learning, never stop pushing yourself. Find out what you really makes you happy and what you really want from life, and go after it as if your life depends on it, because it does. And that's it. That's my talk.
Salim, thank you very much.
Welcome.
One of the downsides of putting everybody on mute is you can't hear the applause, and hopefully you saw that on the.
Oh right, I was worried. You said I was on mute. I was like, I've got to do it again. Right.
Yeah, hopefully you saw the applause and the message you shared there. As I said
Thank
earlier,
you. I appreciate that.
I admire your energy, sir, and I admire how you bring that to the table. And particularly every time we talk, I go away at a different level. So I much appreciate our friendship. And I much appreciate you sharing that thoughts with the people today. Again, if anybody's got any questions, please drop them into the chat. Salim, I'm sure, will be around and respond.
Yeah, I'll be sticking about, and let me see if I can get up. Yeah, no worries.
All right. But thanks, Salim. Thanks for joining us again.
All right. Thanks all. Cheers.
Once again, congratulations on your award for Storm Internet.
Appreciate that. Thanks so much, man. I'll catch up for a beer as soon as we're out of this lockdown again. We'll grab one. Yeah, sure. Awesome. Cheers.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you, super. Thanks, Salim, again. So, how time flies. When we started, we said it was, 3 hours, and we're on to our last speaker. But I'm delighted to introduce to you Anne-Marie Robinson. Anne-Marie has over 30 years experience as at a professional level with performing arts in TV, theatre and film. And she's most commonly known for her role as Katrina in Channel 4's Brookside. She's married to a very familiar face in Oxford, in our community, as she's married to Carl Robinson, who's the manager of Oxford United Football Club. And Anne-Marie has seen how the pressures of both media and the unstable and competitive nature of both these industries can affect mental health and well-being. Today, Anne-Marie is the director of BMR Health and Wellbeing and holds a postgraduate certificate in education. She's a qualified mental health first aid trainer, and I know she's got some fantastic insight and information to share with us. Anne-Marie, thank you for joining us. Welcome to our International Men's Day event in Oxfordshire, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. First of all, can I just say thanks to Ben for introducing us together. So thank you, Ben. And thank you for inviting me on this fantastic day, International Men's Day. What an absolute privilege. You know, this year it is about making practical improvements for the health and well-being of both boys and men. So I just thought what I'm going to share with you today is more of the knowledge that I've learned through my journey, and hopefully you'll be able to take just a few things away with you today that may help you, and also as well to share some of my experiences as well. So you say Brookside, Mike, you know, it feels like back in 1902, it was that long ago. And I just want to say thank you guys for still being here, because I am the last speaker. So I applaud you all for sticking around. And if anyone saw me going like this, I have a dog. So in case anyone kept seeing me doing this, just a couple of things. Great talk from Stephen at the beginning. Sally, thank you for that information, really interesting. And Daren, what a fantastic story, and the work that you're doing is unbelievable. It is just really, really great. Nicola, you're a teacher as well, and you're all about style. I've got my slippers on, so I do apologise, but you're not supposed to see that. I'm all professional on the top, but I have my slippers on. And Dan Knowles, I've been introduced to before from Mind, and they do some fantastic work. And thank you to Salim just then. So I just want to share my screen with you. I know there's been a lot of information, so I won't try not to go on too much to you guys. I'm just going to go from the beginning. Okay, so I just thought it was quite apt that I share a presentation that has actually got some football images on. I'm just trying to get you guys onto the screen. All right. So yeah, I am a director of BMR Health and Wellbeing. So I facilitate mental health first aid training. I do on-site and off-site training, and since the lockdown, we've actually transitioned online. As you can see from this picture, I have now got dark hair. This is a blonde hair picture. Due to the first current lockdown, I actually went and did a box dye. So I'm now brown hair. My passion is mental health. I have had lived experience. My uncle was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He sadly passed away about 10 years ago, but throughout my whole life, I have seen him on his well days and not so well days. So I've had lived experience through many years. It was my mum's brother. And the work that I do in mental health, I just think it's really important. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychotherapist. What I am is, here to educate people and to teach people how they can recognise signs and symptoms of all areas of mental ill health. Okay, as you can see from this slide, our life is actually football. I think I was talking at the beginning, I'm a very big fan of Liverpool Football Club. So yeah, I've been involved in football for quite a number of years now. I've been married to Carl, we've been together for 16 years. So I've seen the ups and downs, as you mentioned before, Mike, in media, especially being an actress, the not quite getting there, not getting the part, and then the resilience, and then, being dropped from a 4-year contract by a new producer when you've got a mortgage to pay, and then all of a sudden it's like, what do you do now? You've been in the biggest soap opera probably at that time. Many years ago, it was quite, a big soap opera, then all of a sudden it was like your contract's finished with no duty of care. We're in a very different era now, things have changed dramatically. But I just wanted to talk to you today about a couple of things. The first thing I want to talk about is what is mental health. We've had lots of figures and facts, and we've talked about many stories today. And I just want to talk about what is mental health. There is people that I come across who actually really are not sure what mental health is. I also want to talk to you about your stress container. So there's a couple of slides within this presentation that I teach, and I believe that are very important to educate people to be able to look after their own well-being. And also as well, masculinity. I just want to briefly talk to you about that. So let me ask you this question, and I don't mind, Mike, if anybody wants to unmute the microphone or if they want to use the chat box. I don't know if I can see that. What is mental health? Oh yeah, here we go. What is mental health? I'm just going to throw this question out. If anybody wants to talk to me. Thanks, Ian.
I think some of it is not being able to escape from your own mind, because you can, as everybody's actually nicely put, it doesn't matter whether you're looking or you are doing well. There's an awful lot of, you imprison your own mind, or you become a prisoner of your own mind sometimes. And that reminds me very much of that kind of mental health. But I guess there's a lot of different aspects of it. I appreciate that, but more often than not, and like Mike, sometimes you can just get trapped in your own thoughts and the pressure around you, and the fact that you might be letting your family down, stuff like that. So you can really get trapped in your own thoughts, I think.
Okay, I suppose it's also it's just the absence of mental illness. So I suppose that's one place, is that not having mental illness suggests there's hopefully mental health, but equally good mental health will be to do with being content and feeling rewarded and doing things that give you a sense of pleasure and having good self-esteem.
Absolutely, Sally. Sorry.
I go one stage further and say it's everything that makes us.
Yeah, everything that makes us. The absence of mental ill health. Mental health is part of our overall health. We all have mental health, just as we do physical health. Our brain is just another organ that we need to look after. I'm just going to turn to this next slide here. So mental health is how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. So we all think, we all feel emotions, and we all behave in a certain way. It's how we cope with the ups and downs of everyday life, how we feel about ourselves and our lives, how we see ourselves in the future, how stress affects us, how we deal with negative events, especially during these past sort of 8 months around COVID, very, very negative event that we've all had to deal with, and as well our self-esteem and confidence. And I always believe confidence isn't about being the loudest person in the group. Confidence comes from doing and stepping outside your comfort zone. The more you do things, the more confident you become at that. There's actually no health without mental health. Physical and mental health are very, very intertwined. Okay. So I just want to bring us on to this here. And this is something I often talk about in some of the sessions that I deliver. And it's around a stress container. Now, we don't have a stress container. We don't have a stress container, but I want you to imagine that you have got a stress container. Just throw some things out to me. What sort of things are in your stress container? So we all experience stress in many, many different ways. So anybody got any ideas?
The supermarket and trying to stay away from people.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what it is, but as soon as I go to the supermarket, I have a mask on and I start coughing. My daughter's like, "What are you doing, Mum? Stop." And I'm like, I can't help it. Is it some sort of stage fright? I don't know. I'm like, yeah, supermarkets. Anything else?
Health.
Health, yeah. How you feeling? Our overall health, yeah, that can stress us out if we're not feeling so good.
Lack of control.
Lack of control, yeah.
That was what I was going to say.
Yeah, same as Daren. Okay.
Fear of the unknown, I suppose, is linked.
Yeah, fear of the unknown.
Yeah. I think uncertainty at the moment's a big one, isn't it?
Finances.
Finances, yeah.
Workload and work stresses, colleagues.
Kids. I don't have kids, but I'd imagine they're pretty stressful.
They are very stressful, Chris.
Kids, workload. We all have different stresses, don't we, that come into our stress container. And I just want to show you this here. This, where it says vulnerability, is shown by the size of the container. The vulnerability is what is seen as the exposure to any physical or emotional vulnerabilities that person's experienced. So you could have two people in exactly the same job with exactly the same stresses coming into the container, but the person with the more vulnerability, with the smaller container, won't be able to cope with that amount of stress coming into the container. So the stress flows in, and what happens is you start to build up and build up and build up. And then if you don't let that stress out with the tap at the bottom by using some helpful coping mechanisms, then your stress container is going to overflow, and that's when you start to develop some problems. That's when we start having emotional snapping. Now, for me, I am quite mindful. When I feel stressed, I can feel physical symptoms. If I've been on the laptop all day, I start to feel like a bit tingling in my face, or maybe start to get a headache. I can feel it. I start snapping at my daughter, and I can recognize that within myself. Each and every one of us has got our own unique stress signature. So, for example, Mike, what stresses you out maybe different from me. Daren, the same as you. And what we need to start looking at is how we can deal and cope with that stress. I don't want us to focus on the vulnerability. what people need to do with a smaller container is learn to how to manage stress better. So you may have heard of, you know, the fight, flight, or freeze response. You know, when stress comes in, that's when our adrenal glands create cortisol, adrenaline that comes through your body. Okay, some stress is good for us. It can really, really spurge us on. You know, if I am at the side of a stage and I'm waiting to go on stage, and I start having my stress containers, you know, getting filled up, I start to feel sweaty, my heart's going, you know, and then I go, and then it's like you get a round of applause, and at the end of it, I'm like, that's really, really spurred me on. But when our stress container starts to overflow and we don't let that stress out, that's when we start having some problems. Okay. Stress increases blood pressure, and too much stress can be really, really damaging. Okay, so what I just want us to look at is about how we can start looking at some helpful coping strategies and some protective factors to look after ourselves, yeah, to look after us, because we all experience stress in one way or the other. So things like positive parenting, having self-belief, having that self-belief, being able to problem solve, be able to conflict resolution, emotional literacy, you know, being self-aware and knowing how to manage your thoughts and feelings. The ability to be able to express yourself. You know, we've talked about how men don't really open up. It's about being in tune with your thoughts and feelings and your behaviours and being able to speak out. What are your values and beliefs? What's important to that person? And, you know, what sort of choices are they making? So some of the helpful coping strategies that we know is proven, that physical activity releases endorphins, you know, that happy hormone. And I don't mean physical activity in terms of going to pump weights in the gym. We can find some physical activity by just going out in nature, having a little bit of a walk, you know, doing some boxing, doing some yoga, finding something that you enjoy. It doesn't necessarily mean going to the gym. Again, it's proven good nutrition. I don't know about you, but during these times, you know, if I've been eating, what is it, Deliveroo and Just Eat, and there's all these delivery companies that can drop fast food to your door, it's very, very easy to start slipping into bad nutrition. And we know it really, really helps our mental well-being if we put goodness in our body. Okay, don't underestimate sleep. Sleep is massively important. You know, some people can function very well on 5 or 6 hours of sleep. For me, that is a risk factor for me. I know I need at least 7 or 8 hours of sleep. Okay, start thinking about, are you having enough sleep? What you put in your body? Are you getting some level of physical activity? Okay, have you got positive relationships? You know, a sense of purpose, somebody was saying before. Are you in a stable environment? So these are some of the, just a few of the helpful coping strategies that I've picked out here. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the unhelpful coping strategies. We could talk about abuse, stress, any traumatic, you know, anything traumatic life events like bereavement, divorce, illnesses, any natural disasters, prison, poor parenting, education, poverty and unemployment. And some of the unhelpful coping strategies, you know, I don't know about you guys, but it's quite easy being in lockdown to be able to have a few beers, not think about getting in your car in the morning because you maybe not have anywhere to drive to. And it's quite easy to get sucked into maybe having a few too many drinks. Does anybody know what the recommended government guidelines are for units per week for a man? Anybody know that? It's really weird because I can't see everybody on my screen. I feel like I'm...
Not enough.
I know that it's, yeah, I agree. I know that it's less than I usually tend to drink.
21.
What 21, Ben? What do you think?
21.
It's no, it's really low, isn't it? It's like 8 to 12 or something like that.
I think the government guidelines are 28 for men, but the medical guidelines are 21.
Okay. For men is 14 units per week. So a pint, I think around about 4% volume is about 2.3 units. Okay, so 14 units for a man. What do we think it is for a lady?
Same. Well, I thought it was 14 for a lady, actually, but maybe I'm obviously out of date.
You're absolutely right, Sally. It's 14. We've got equal opportunities. You can have 14 units. So a bottle of wine is, bottle of red wine, 12% is 9 units. So these are the government guidelines. We know drinking increases depression, anxiety. So we really need to be mindful about, this unhelpful coping strategy around how many units we should be drinking each week. Again, we know drugs, smoking, gambling, sex addictions are really unhelpful coping strategies when it comes to our mental health. Okay. Something that I just wanted to share with you, which I think is really, really important. It's like how we're all different. Sorry. It's something called the frame of reference. Okay. So if I was to say to you the word home, I would imagine that some of you may say, safe place, family, maybe for some people it could be quite stressful. So you will all probably explain what home is to you, but I would gather that it would probably all be very, very similar. But the thing is with this frame of reference, this was put together in 1975 by a lady called Jackie and a gentleman called Aaron Schiff. And these are journals which shows you how we view the world, how our window to the world is based on our attitudes of our upbringing, maybe our sexuality, our education, our disability, any chronic illness. What you've experienced throughout your life shapes us as a person, our attitudes and beliefs. So this is like looking down a camera lens. This is like building your whole rucksack of experiences. So what shapes us? So for me, I went to my education, I went to a state school, grew up in a place called Birkenhead. Aspirations, I wanted to play volleyball to a high level. Disability, I've got a niece who's got disabilities, certain illnesses in my family. I've got 2 big brothers. I could go through this, and this sort of lens and my sort of what's gone in my life shapes me as an individual. And it just shows us how we're all human. We've all been shaped by different attitudes and beliefs. And it just points that we need to recognise that every single one of us is different. And when we're speaking to people, we need to set our judgments aside. Okay. So, which leads me on to this next question around what is masculinity? If anybody wants to maybe share with me.
What men think they should be.
What men think they should be. Interesting, Ben. Okay. What men think they should be. Okay.
What society tells us we should be.
Alex, what society tells us we should be. Yeah. And that is, do you know what, Alex, were you saying that? This really, really intrigued me, because I was like, actually, I'm going to ask, actually, what is the Oxford Dictionary's definition? And I actually put this in, and what actually came up was it came up with these words about being handsome, muscled, driven, a prime example of masculinity. And I was quite fascinated about this. I was like, wow, really, really was. Which leads me on to the impact of these words I'm going to say now, toxic masculinity. And it's only recently that I've sort of really wanted to understand this toxic masculinity. And some of the common sort of phrases that you may have heard directed at you or someone around you. Maybe you've seen it in television shows or movies. And maybe some of us maybe have used it ourselves around, imagine you're a little boy and maybe you're going through some, painful injury, or you're going through a heartbreak. and your whole world's crashing in, and you're told to man up, you know, instead of being asked gently, what's making you cry, and how are you feeling, what can you do about it, you know. And these are some of the common phrases: boys don't cry, come on, man up, don't be such a baby, don't cry like a girl, etc. And I just think it really, really, when feelings are dismissed and gender defining thinking is heard repeatedly, a young person, you know, expressing the real feelings will begin to bottle up this sort of sadness. You know, it shouldn't be different from a man or woman. You know, going back to what is mental health, it's about how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. Just because, you know, one of us has got a willy, it doesn't mean that we don't think and feel. Thanks, Chris. I just think we just need to start thinking about opening up more. You know, maybe this is why men don't talk. And, you know, I've been doing quite a lot of work within Oxford United Football Club around mental health. They've got a psychotherapist there, so they've got the professional person if anybody does want to go and speak to a gentleman called Gary Bloom. And I believe there's more strength in vulnerability than masculinity. That's my opinion. And it's always seen as, oh, the big guy, you know, needs to be tough and to cope. I just want to take you back to the stress container and share sort of my experience with my husband. And he'll openly talk about his stress container. At the beginning of his career, he's been, well, he was Oxford United's manager now. Before that, he was managing Charlton, and before that, he was managing MK Dons. And that's the reason why I moved to Milton Keynes originally. So we've been together for many, many years. Now, at the beginning of his managerial journey, there was times when, you know, he'd be up and down the motorway, he'd be eating takeaways, he'd be having coffees, he'd be not exercising. Quite a few of those risk factors that we were just talking about before, not sleeping well, you know, stress coming into his container, not just from things at home, but external things like fans, like the media. He was the youngest manager at that particular time, I think, in the world. So he was 29 when he took on that role at MK Dons. And back then, you know, he would openly admit that he was trying to be this person that he probably wasn't, because he had to be the tough man, the boss, the go-to person if anyone's got a problem. So all of a sudden, a lot of these stresses were going into the stress container and filling up and filling up and filling up. And with not letting that tap out, he started to wake up in the middle of the night and with, you know, sweating, heart palpitations, really showing some physical signs, thinking he was having a heart attack. You know, I would wake up and panic and didn't know what was going on. This was like, you know, over 10 years ago. And I was like, what is going on? And this sort of took me back to my uncle. And I was thinking, you know, is this a mental health issue here? Mental ill health issue? But what we quickly established is that he went and sought professional help. And back at MK Dons back then, there was a guy called Simon Edwards, who sadly is actually no longer with us. He passed away of cancer a few years ago, but he was the guy that was a bit of a father figure, really, to Carl, and he would talk to him because it's quite hard to talk to people that are close to you. So with him coming to me, you know, he probably felt maybe he didn't want to speak to me about it because it may have brought up thoughts and feelings around my uncle, or maybe just, you know, that I'm not good enough. I don't know why he didn't speak to me, but he went to speak to Simon Edwards. And you know what? It was the best thing he ever did. He started to understand his own mental health in terms of his thoughts and feelings and behaviours, and started to put things into practice, into a plan, sorry. So he started to look at, you know, reducing his caffeine, started to reduce the alcohol, started to talk. And that is the big thing, you know. It's only the past few years is when people are starting to speak about it. You know, there is still a long, long way to go. There really, really is. But But I do just firmly believe that we need to move away from these phrases. Come on, man up, you know, toughen up. What's wrong with you? Boys don't cry. You know, we need to let that stress out. Now, I know Dan was talking about suicide just before, and I've been sort of, each week I look at something called Worldometers, worldometers.info. I don't know if anybody goes onto this website, but you can see throughout the whole world just fascinating data about births, about deaths in the world, about people who are malnourished, people who, I don't know, how many TVs are bought today, how many tweets have been sent. There's a whole load of data. And I look every week, so when I'm delivering some training, I'm quite fascinated about the numbers. And worldwide to date, the last time I looked earlier on today was 950,535 suicides worldwide, 950,000. COVID cases, 1,357,000, you know, so we've got a real, yes, we're in a pandemic, but we're in a world pandemic really in terms of male suicide figures here, in my opinion. So, you know, let's go back to our stress container. If people are bottling up stress, it's going to lead into anxiety, into depression, to suicidal thoughts, and then ultimately suicide. And this just brings me on to a friend of mine who used to work with Carl at MK Dons Football Club. He was his assistant manager, Richie Barker, and he, very, very good friend of ours. And what actually happened is his brother, Chris Barker, sadly took his life last Christmas. And I remember speaking to to Richie Barker and also his sister-in-law, and she just felt so guilty. She was like, we didn't even know. And I just wanted to sort of show you this slide here. This is Richie's words. This is what he said to us. So if you just want to have a little read of that slide. Okay, so, you know, it says there, my brother felt like he had nowhere to turn and no one to speak to, you know, and this just brings me back into saying, you know, this is why we need to talk. This is why we need to, you know, reach out to people, you know, take this time on International Men's Day to go, do you know what, if I'm feeling crap, if I'm, you know, got behaviours that aren't really my normal behaviours or my thoughts and feelings, or just having, you know, a bad time, don't bottle it in, talk, get it out there, speak to people, actually start writing down now a list, a support list for yourself. Who's got your back? You know, as men, you know, especially my husband, he's the one that, you know, provides and he's the man of the family, but ultimately he still has thoughts and feelings and may not want to share that, but it's really, really important that we talk and we start reducing these figures, because I just find this absolutely just astonishing. You know, when I look at this worldometer, this data that is around, you know, to see those figures change, and, you know, we just need to break down the stigma around it's, you know, we need to start talking about it a little bit more. I know my husband now's actually come back home, so I don't know if anybody is any Oxford fans on this call and anyone wants to ask about any of the work that we've been doing at Oxford United, please feel free to drop us a message. I've not looked at the chat box because I've been talking. Let me just stop sharing this screen. Okay. And just bring everybody back. I just wanted to sort of wrap up and just say, yeah, you know, I've talked about what is mental health, talked about, you know, our stress container, the protective factors, the risk factors. We can all take responsibility for our own well-being. You know, we can do that by talking, by sharing stories, you know. Mike, you've just shared an incredible story about you. And when you ripped that piece of paper up, for me, I was like, that is just amazing what you shared today. And we need more people to just open up, because we're human. You know, life is like this, ups and downs. It's not like that, is it? You know, we've got to be able to bounce back. We're going to feel, you know, we're going to go through life events, bereavements, you know, things that pandemics, you know, we're going to go through things that we need to get through. So just start talking a little bit more. I know there's a few questions. Sorry, Mike, do you want to, because I need to read these questions here. Is anybody got any questions? I feel like I'm just going a little bit waffly now. Sorry, Mike.
Has anybody got any questions for Anne-Marie at all?
Hi, Anne-Marie, it's Chris. I put something in the chat, which is something I get into trouble for quite a lot. So I do tell people to man up. Actually, I think that as part of the historical makeup of men, having that capacity is really important for us and has been really important for us in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So just with that specific phrase, the rest of them, I think, on, you know, you never want to tell anyone they shouldn't cry or they can't cry. But for men, what I say to them is turn it into a positive and a strength. You know, man up and seek that support.
Is that resilience, Chris? I don't know.
No. Sorry, Dawn?
Would you not see that as resilience and, like, you know, having a mindset of being able to, I must say, man up. I don't know. I struggle with the gender difference. For me personally, just very, very quickly, you know, I sort of shared about my uncle with his schizophrenia. You know, I'm going back into the 1950s when it was compulsory to go into the armed forces. And I wish he was here today to have this conversation, because he had some bit of a fracas with one of the sergeant majors. And I only recently found out about 6 months ago that he was put into consolidate confinement for a month. And I firmly believe that he was 6'2", looked very handsome, bit of an Elvis character, very manly, masculine is what the definition of the Oxford Dictionary says. But he, I believe, felt like he had to be this strong character, which internally he wasn't. And I would love to have this conversation with him to see, you know, what his thoughts were around that time.
Well, that's the thing, Emery. I talk about it in terms of that kind of thing. You know, past it was incredibly important for the man's makeup to be able to put his emotions in check and man up, just like your grandfather did. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I mean, it's war, so it's all wrong. But guys are running across battlefields into bullet fire, and I think that was the right kind of time for them. And obviously, it was the men again, whether that's right or wrong. So, you know, I think it is back to front, and I think it should be used as a term of an expression of strength and resilience, and that manning up and accepting your mental health and owning it and doing something about it is kind of the brave approach. And I don't know if that's right. I sort of, as I say, I get into trouble for it from time to time because I think people have got such a negative connotation and association with that phrase. So it's not really a question to be answered now, I suppose. Whatever your opinion is of it, whatever.
Absolutely, Chris. And I think it's very individual, you know, even just on this session today, you know, we've all experienced or know somebody who's, you know, had mental illness, or, you know, we all, you know, it's 1 in 4 adults experience some sort of mental health issue. So I firmly believe that, yes, we need to, you know, have that resilience and that strength and be able to get through these tough times. But when people don't talk about it, I think Stephen, at the beginning when you were going through your breakup, you know, you didn't talk to anybody, you know, you kept it inside, where, you know, if you had someone to talk to and go, do you know what? I don't know about any of the ladies here, but I know if I have a good chat with my mates and I go, this has happened, that's happened, this is doing me head in. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I feel all right now. You know, men tend to go and have a pint and stand at the end of the bar and, you know,
talk football.
Football, yeah. Whereas women, I don't know, there's more stats out there that, you know, women talk more. That's maybe just, you know.
No, I think it's fair. My mum will spit in the garden, sit there with her pals and talk for 4 hours. I don't know any men that have the capability to do that, to be honest. Certainly not about anything substantial. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's all right. No worries. Sorry, I've just got a couple of... Sorry, my eyes are going all funny. Oh, great. Thank you, Ben. Both Robinsons talk so well. Carl is actually here at the side here. So maybe if he gets on Zoom, Zoom, maybe you might be here till about 10 o'clock.
I was hoping to squeeze in the question.
Can you give us a wave for all the football fans?
Hey. Go on then, Ben. You better fire away the question very, very quickly, Ben, as you urge into.
So I would say that I am going to sound like a 12-year-old boy now. I'm a 30-year-old business owner. It's a bit embarrassing, but I'd say that 99.99% of Oxford United fans are honoured to have Carl Robinson as a manager. All the work that he's done for the club and to the team. How hard is it when you do get stick, when you hear an idiot in the stand who says personal stuff because you do get it about your players or about you or about your family? How hard is it?
This could be another Zoom for like hours.
Initially, it was difficult because when you care so much and you want people to do so well for their own families, and I work with a lot of young players and you want them to succeed. And the hard bit is, as a manager, you sort of blank out from anything that's negative in and around the stadium. The difficulty is when you've got your mum or your dad or your wife or your daughter sat there and they hear it. And I worry more when my family come to games and we're not winning, which is quite a lot of the time at the moment, that they struggle to deal with it a little bit more. We have to accept it as part of, well, we're meant to accept it as part of our industry. And I did an interview today for BBC Radio Oxford, and we've got a few players who are getting some real terrible abuse over social media, to the point of it was very difficult dealing with the situation yesterday. And you'd imagine them to be quite strong characters, but where we live in this world where there's no fans at the moment, they're taking everything home with them. And we had a conversation in work today, and we were talking about mental health and about how social media is getting so much more ruthless than ever before. And they're taking that home with them. And my players care so much that when they find this criticism coming home with them, they seem to take it very personal. So I deal with it quite well now. I've got better with age. I just come home and unload to Anne.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated. Thank you again, Anne-Marie, for joining us. Thank you. Such a wonderful way to end the event today. And for the Oxford United fans, thank you, Carl, for joining us as well. Thank you from me, actually. My boy has been mascot for the first friendly of the season for 2 previous seasons, not this year because we couldn't do it. And he's loved every single moment of the attention you've given him at the time. So much appreciated from that side of it.
Thank you.
And I echo what Ben says in terms of what you've done for the club. But Anne-Marie, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, your expertise, your experience. I felt really informative in terms of how you pulled a lot of the things of the event today together, and some of the content was really thought-provoking. Thank you for sharing those coping strategies as well. I'm sure that's going to help all of us, and actually a lot of the work that I've done personally since 2019 has really been around those coping strategies, so I hope people take those away. As you mentioned earlier, thank you to Ben for introducing both of us and having you as part of our event today. It's been brilliant. And I'll speak on behalf of many of the attendees that I know that follow the fortunes of Oxford United. We wish Carl and the team all the well for the rest of the season. And we know you, as you've mentioned, you live with it as well, 100%. So all the best for both of you for the rest of the season. So thank you again for spending your time for preparing us. People know a little bit more about your business as well, as your background as well. And again, thanks for sharing your expertise with us again today. Much appreciated. And that leads me on to just close the event. So final reference to the auction site. remember that link where the auction is actually open until midnight tomorrow on the 20th. So if you want to bid for any of the items, please do, and top up the funds that we're raising to Oxfordshire Mind. And as I say, that brings to the end the event in Oxfordshire today in aid of Oxfordshire Mind on International Men's Day. Today's event was in part raising awareness around some real key issues for men and boys, and I'd like to think that we've achieved that, as well as bringing awareness about a number of other things. The apologies really, I'm gutted that we couldn't do this as a live event and have a little bit more networking, and certainly the afternoon tea that was lined up by the Hilton looked exciting. And as Anne-Marie said earlier, thank you for all of you for staying to the end to retain engagement for all the various talks and all the inspiration that we've received today. I hope you've enjoyed the event. I hope you've enjoyed your time with us today. And importantly, I hope you've heard a few things from our speakers today that may save your life, or it may save the life of those that you know, whether that's mental health or physical health. Today was certainly a celebration event, so we had a mix of speakers, and I hope you took something away from each of those speakers. So I'm grateful for all of you being able to join us. So may I close the event for International Men's Day in Oxfordshire with my thanks first of all to all the speakers, each of whom, as I say, have shared some wonderful content, some thought-provoking information. And that's from Steve Cook, Dr. Sally Cubbin, Daren Elsley, Nicola Whybrow, Dan Knowles, Salim Benadel, and Anne-Marie Robinson. All of you much appreciate the time you've given to this event for free to help us raise awareness. And of course, to all the audience, either on Zoom or through this live stream on YouTube, thank you very much for joining us. As I said earlier, today we've raised at least £660 for Oxfordshire Mind, and the auction will hopefully top that up a little bit more. As I say, this event was a live stream earlier, and it will be saved on my YouTube channel, which is Mike Foster Oxford. So please can I encourage you to share the availability of that video so that people can watch the recording and help us to create an even wider awareness of those matters that we've discussed today whilst we've been in celebration of International Men's Day. So I thank you again for all of your support. Thank you again for joining us. It would have been a lonely place for speakers if there was no audience. And again, enjoy the rest of your evening. But again, thank you for joining us. Wish you well. And thank you again for your support.